And hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss, the political dragon, coming from our offices in the Bronx, New York. Looking forward to speaking with each and every one of you. It's going to be a very interesting conversation today. Obviously, you're taking a break from watching the MILF Mansion, the Kardashians of wherever the hell they are, or the local football game, and I appreciate and thank you for taking the time. If this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, I want you to know that we appreciate and thank you for being part of our audience. To sum it up, we do long-form political commentary, talking about the things that many in the news media don't want you to think about, don't want you to have a conversation about. We do this because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe that we have a right internationally, everywhere in the world, to talk about the issues that affect each and every one of us. And we hope you'll enjoy that conversation and join in with your tweets, your chats, to let us know what you think about all the issues, whether we bring it up or you bring it up. Because we don't care if your government doesn't agree. We don't care if the internet overlords don't agree. You have a right to speak, and we want to hear your voice. So we're going to have this conversation with you, and we're going to be talking about the various things that are happening right now. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about with what's happening in the Middle East, with Israel, with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran. That is a big deal. It is obviously continuing to capture the minds of everyone in the world. There is a lot happening there. Americans are at risk. Germans are at risk. The United Kingdom and individuals from around the world are actively being held hostage, are actively at risk, have been killed. So we need to continue to talk about that. But it's not the only thing happening right now. Much of the news media has been exclusively focused on that situation, which we will discuss. But there are a lot of things that are happening on the sidelines you're told not to pay attention to and are happening in the background that are just as important to what's going to happen in your life. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those issues as well, because I think it's pretty important and it's going to have a direct impact on you, whether you're an American or not. So we're going to try and cover all of those things. Please do let me know if you're able to hear me properly, if it's too loud, too quiet, whatever. You can, of course, reach us on YouTube, on Facebook. We will be reposting this on Rumble after the show. Links to everything we're going to talk about will be available after the show. We only have one screen available at this moment to be able to share with you. Okay, all of that out of the way. Let's get into what's happening. By the way, the breaking news at the moment, over the last 2 hours, it has been reported that the second wave of UN humanitarian aid coming from Egypt into the Gaza Strip through the southern border did not arrive today. Many people earlier were reporting that it did happen. It did not. 17 trucks of humanitarian aid carrying food and water did not enter the Gaza Strip from Egypt. That's very important to keep in mind. Egypt has not been supporting Palestine. They have not been supporting Hamas, at least not directly, in terms of humanitarian aid. And what we do know is there has been also reports of an explosion in ambulances at the southern border, the Egyptian border between Gaza and Egypt, which may be part of the reason why the UN trucks, the humanitarian aid, is not getting in. That is not a strike from Israel. Israel has been attacking or counterattacking the north. They have been fighting forces of Hamas in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, not the southern area where they have been telling all the Palestinians to evacuate to for their own safety. So this is not an Israeli strike, which would mean that leaves Hamas, Hezbollah, the other Iran-backed terrorist organizations striking against their own people and against Egypt. Now, it could be that one of the rockets being transported by Hezbollah blew up. It could be a suicide attack by excuse me, not Hezbollah, but Hamas. It could be Hamas attacking some of its own citizens, which they do on a regular basis. We're not sure at this moment, but we do know it's not the Israelis. And people like Rashida Tlaib, and we see many of these organizations like the Democratic Socialists of America, like to take this news that as it comes out, and they like to twist it, to try and use it to shape your mind, to try and get you on their side emotionally by giving you half the information, to say, oh, it must be the Israelis striking the southern border of the Gaza Strip in Egypt, when there is no evidence of that. Just like when the hospital was struck earlier this week by Hamas in trying to send even more, thousands of the 8,000 some odd rockets that have been fired into Israel to attack civilians. About 500 of them have been misfired because they're Iranian rockets. They're not reliable, and they have been misfiring those and striking Palestinians over 500 times now in the war so far. And one of those was a Hamas rocket from from Iran, that struck the hospital, and that was initially blamed by Rashida Tlaib and the Democratic Socialists of America and the far left on Israel, when in fact it's actually Hamas, the terrorist organization. We need to talk about these things. John, thank you for you're the first one commenting today and says, looking good, thank you. Are you going to talk about Mark Molinaro today? Yes, I am absolutely going to be talking about that. Or Mike Lawler, the fake Republican congressman. I know John considers Mike Lawler a rhino, and it seems to be, and that may be a question about Mark Molinaro as well, because what I'm going to do, normally in the show, we start talking about international news, which I actually just did start doing. But I want to go to the United States first, since talking about Israel, talking about Hamas and Iran, how this is affecting us, the international policy of the Biden administration and buying hostages, how that is going to affect America and American safety and safety around the world. Since that's going to take a lot longer to explain and to go through, I want to go through the U.S. first and then go into the international, which is normally the reverse way of how we handle it on this channel. So I will be talking about Mark Molinaro, who let me state right up front, Mark Molinaro, you have my email, you have my phone number, your staff know me personally, you've talked to me several times in person. I am more than happy to have you on this channel in an interview to answer any of the questions that I raise about what your recent comments and actions, why you did them, and what's going on, because you've raised some very serious concerns that constituents, voters in the New York 19th District, and of course throughout America, really want an answer to, because it's affecting each and every one of us the longer we don't have a House Speaker. So I do want to give him that opportunity to respond, and I've said that publicly many times, and I will say it again, besides the fact that, by the way, Mark, Representative Molinaro, you already have agreed during the campaign trail that you would do an interview with me. I have been asking you since you've been elected to do the interview you already agreed to. You still will not reach out to me to do so. I don't know why you're worried about having a conversation. That being said, let's continue and go forward. Let's talk about what's happening in the world. Let's start with the United States. Let's start with what's happening in our government right now. Immigration is a big deal. And let's deal with that, because that affects what's happening around the world. We are receiving more and more asylum seekers and refugees. These are individuals who are traveling from Angola. They're traveling from the Middle East. They're traveling from Venezuela into the United States en masse. And they are not slowing down. We've been told that Kamala Harris, since March of 2021, is the czar. She's in charge of the southern border, and she was going to resolve this. She had one meeting and one trip about the southern border to date. That's how effective and efficient she has been so far. And her answer was, well, we have to give more humanitarian aid. We have to give more aid economically to the Central and Southern American nations, and that will stop people from coming into America. That is emphatically, empirically wrong. There is no way around that. I don't care how much you want to believe in AOC that feelings are more important than facts. The facts are, there is no your truth about it, is the truth that she has failed. And the Biden-Harris administration have failed to secure the United States southern border. It is wide open. And I know that depending on which source you want to look at in the news media, if you're going to NPR, they're going to tell you that, about 2 million illegal aliens entered into the United States in the last year. Except if you also go to the New York Times, they will tell you that the number is 2.4 million illegal aliens. In fact, the third largest number of illegal aliens entering the United States in a row. We have broken records at historic levels of illegal aliens entering the United States more than at any other time in our history. And again, the third time in a row we have hit these historic numbers. 2.4, a little bit less than what we projected at 2.7. And I think, again, depending on which source you want to go to and how they are counting the illegal aliens entering our nation, it may well be 2.7. It just depends on how you count this, because we are seeing Democrats desperately trying to convince the American people that no, they're not illegal aliens, they're refugees. Well, if you're a refugee and you're trying to get out of Angola, you're trying to leave the Sudan, you're going from many of the hot spots around the world, the United States is not your first stop. You don't have to come to the United States to get refuge, to have asylum. There are many places, especially in Europe, that you can go to instead. So I find it dubious and misleading to say they're refugees and the United States is the only place they could go to. That's a lie. That is emphatically a lie. It's just not true. But we do know, as is being reported today, that Venezuela is now the largest single group of nationality, of a national origin that have entered the United States, with over 500,000 having entered the United States within the last year alone. And we have seen that the Biden administration, while saying that they're going to crack down on illegal immigration, restarting the border wall that was created by the Trump administration, something they absolutely swore in the 2019, 2020, and the 2020 election. Multiple times, Joe Biden said he would not put a single dollar to the border wall as per the Trump administration. That he ended that on the first day he gained office, January 21st, 2021. He stopped all funding and stopped all construction of the border wall. Well, here we are in 2023, and he has now restarted that, circumventing 26 Democrat-created laws to end the funding of the border wall to create the wall. Why? Because security matters. Because we have open borders and it is overwhelming our nation. It is harming our nation. Whether you're in Chicago or New York, throughout all of California, the southern border in Texas, Arizona, our nation is overwhelmed by illegal aliens coming into our nation and draining our resources. That is a fact. It is not a question. That's why New York is projected to spend $12 billion on illegal aliens. And to answer the question or the statement that we have heard historically for decades now, that illegal aliens are a benefit to the United States, that we need them, that they are a net positive, they generate more income than we spend on them, then why is New York State going $12 billion into debt? Why is it that Chicago is broken? Why are we seeing state after state, city after city, all of the sanctuaries are bankrupt and going deeper into debt because of those illegal aliens? If they're such a boon to the economy, why is the United States economy? Inflation is continuing to rise. We've seen it, as we predicted in this channel, it's reached at least 17%, according to the United States Fed. And as reported by Tim Pool and several sources, the aggregate inflation under the Biden administration is closer to 24%, even higher than what we believed it was, which is a recession. Something that the Biden-Harris administration and many of the Democrats and news media are remiss to say. It's the reason why they changed the definition of recession, so that they didn't have to say that, so that they could win in the 2022 midterm elections, and hopefully they expect to try and win in the 2024 presidential election. By changing the terms, by hiding the facts from you, from not dealing with the reality as it exists, that you know every time you pay your bills, that you know every time you go to the store and you try and buy food that you need for your family. How many items have doubled in its cost in just the last year, let alone since 2021? It's ridiculous. So we want to address this. So we know there's a problem. The border is open, and it is irrefutable that the Biden-Harris administration have failed to secure the border. They have failed to secure the United States. And that's why we have seen over the summer, Secretary Mayorkas, in speaking to Representative Darrell Issa, as we have shown on this channel, when he was speaking to him in front of Congress, congressional hearing, he admitted that 140 known or suspected terrorists have entered the United States in 2023 alone. That is a 46 times, not percent, 46 times increase in known and suspected terrorists entering the United States from 2000. That is a 43% increase versus 2022. And notice, this is happening at the same time that the Middle East is going into flames, and we are seeing China continue to pressure all of Southeast Asia, and Russia continues its war against the Ukraine. It tells you how these things are connected. It shows you very clearly that you can call it correlation, but the fact is these things are happening like dominoes falling one after the other. The weak presidency with bad policy has led to the opportunity to endanger American citizens' lives and their economic futures. It's just a fact. It cannot be denied. And we have seen, like I said, we are seeing institutions like NPR try and hide some of these numbers. Oh, there were about 2 million. If you look at the NPR article, and again, the link will be after the show, the NPR article, Venezuelans become the largest nationality for illegal U.S. border crossings. They're illegal aliens. They've broken the law. That was on October 22nd at 9:23 a.m. Came out today. You see it from the Associated Press. And in there, they state that there's about 2 million individuals who entered the United States. Not a record. But if you just go to the New York Times and look at their article, crossings at the U.S. border, at the U.S. southern border, are higher than ever. An article that was written by Eileen Sullivan on October 21st, 2023, well, she instantly refutes and says in the third paragraph, there were more than 2.4 million apprehensions in 2023 alone. Well, which one is it? And see, that's one of the problems. The news media loves to try and conflate the information. On one hand, you get NPR, the Associated Press, saying, well, it's about 2 million. Well, about 2 million is 2.4 million, which is a record number. It is an increase versus 2022. You are being deceived. And why are they deceiving you? How are they deceiving you? Well, the answer is because the Supreme Court has just allowed the Biden-Harris administration to lie to you, to use the Misinformation Governance Board, the Ministry of Truth. They have reactivated the 1984-esque Ministry of Truth to be able to have the White House collude with social media and the news media agencies to be able to promote specific types of information for you. Now, you may say, Mike, how can you say that? That sounds so incendiary. It must be some kind of conspiracy theory. Except this is a factual item. We know this because we have the articles for this. Again, links will be provided at the end of the show, but what we know for sure is that according to YouTube, they have changed their authoritative sources. This happened 4 days ago. That YouTube wants you to watch news from approved news sources. This was reported by The Verge 4 days ago. YouTube wants to get you watching more news from, quote, authoritative sources. In other words, media that has been approved in its messaging, media that carries the message that will help promote Democrats and the left. Because social media is controlled, 82% of social media and the news media agencies are left-leaning in their bias, if not higher, depending on which company you're looking at specifically. And so they are trying to isolate and remove, to suppress and oppress you by denying you the opportunity to have conversation and to be able to gain information. As we see the news media just tossing information to the side over and over again. And when I say that the Supreme Court has enabled this, the article from the Southeast Missourian is High Court allows the White House to continue to work to combat controversial social media posts. Just one of several articles about this that came out on October 21st, yesterday, detailing that the Supreme Court on Friday said it would indefinitely block the restriction of the White House colluding with news media and social media to limit and to censor what you get to hear. It's very straightforward, folks. And you will hear the left try to say, and you will hear CNN and MSNBC, you will hear the ABC and the New York Times try to tell you, oh, no, it's not, we're not trying to censor you. We just don't want anyone to see what you have to say. They don't want you to have a conversation. They're going to tell you all the news that's fit to print in their opinion, in the way that they want you to hear it. But they're not actually giving you the full story. Again, why have we not been hearing repeatedly stories from all the mainstream media talking about the failure of Kamala Harris? She's been put in charge of the southern border. Why is no one challenging her on why she isn't doing her job? How she has failed, according to the New York Times, at a record level 3 years in a row. Why is there no article, no question from interviewers from the mainstream media saying, what are you doing? You've been failing. What are you doing? What have you been trying to do? No, they won't do that. They don't want to address that this is a problem and that their policies have not only failed to stop illegal immigration, they have increased it. And things like seeing Eric Adams, the practical progressive mayor of New York City, going to South America, that is equally useless. What did Columbia say to him? Go back to New Jersey. He is a failure, just like Kamala Harris. The difference being that Kamala Harris was using federal dollars to take her trips around the world, and New York City Mayor Eric Adams used the taxpayer money from New York City and New York State to take his vacation trip through South America, which achieved nothing. Not that anyone thought it would. If these southern border nations like Venezuela are not, they don't care about what Kamala Harris had to say, how in the hell are they going to care what Eric Adams, a mayor, has to say? He is multiple magnitudes of less importance and less impact on international policy and the United States policy. Why in the hell did he think he would ever get anyone's attention? He didn't. He did this to have a business trip on the taxpayer dime, and we would strongly suggest that his itinerary, all of his guests and the staff that he took with him, throughout his South American trip should be made public so that American citizens can see how he spent money. Did he take any donors with him on this trip? What meetings did he have? Was he having meetings with donors with ties to with donations, ties with donations to him and the Democratic Party in New York State and the United States? Was he really there just to get more money? Which we believe is the case. We cannot say that for a fact, but I don't see him giving up any of his details on how this was financed. That still has not been revealed. Mind you, Eric Adams isn't the only one doing this. Excuse me. He isn't the only one who's decided that they're so important that they need to go overseas to have an international discussion to try and conduct international policy for the United States, even though they represent cities and states. New York Governor Kathy Hochul has been in Israel for the last couple of days, and we do give our condolences to Kathy Hochul. Her father recently suddenly died. It was a sudden death. The circumstances of that have not been revealed, or we have not noticed that. And we do give our condolences on the loss of her family. I've lost my father as well. I understand, and it was rather sudden as well. He was due to a car accident and complications from Agent Orange. So I understand how that could devastate any individual and any family. We give our condolences to her on that. But at the same time, that doesn't take away from the fact that she's in Israel and we have no idea why she's there. Why is the governor of New York State, at a time that New York State is in debt, that we are dealing with a illegal alien crisis, we do not have enough money to take care of the illegal aliens that are pouring into New York State, over 120,000 of them. We cannot house them. We do not have enough food for them. We do not have the money to pay to put them in 4-star hotels, and we are kicking out American citizens, mothers and children and veterans. We're kicking them out of shelters and out of programs to allow illegal aliens to be paid $60,000 a year to live in a 4-star hotel. And we're putting an American citizen mom who's poor out on the street with her children. Kathy Hochul needs to be in New York addressing that problem rather than being in Israel talking about American politics that she has no right and no ability to influence. The governor of New York does not make the United States policy international policy. They don't. She does nothing. She is there simply to get more money. She is there as a fundraising event saying that she cares about the 1.7 million Jewish Americans in New York State, in New York City alone, that she wants to receive donations for as she runs in the next election to be reelected. That's why she's there. It's not because she's there to do anything positive. She can't send aid to Israel. She can't send military arms to Israel. She's not negotiating to get any of the American hostages back. She's wasting your money. And she's doing it to promote her political agenda, her ambitions politically. Mind you, she's not the only one doing it, because Gavin Newsom is also doing the same exact thing. Gavin Newsom is about to go over to China. Why in the hell is Gavin Newsom going to China? I have no idea. Gavin Newsom represents no one in the federal government. He is the governor of California. But he seems to have aspirations to be more. He has political ambition. And part of that political ambition is to take the money from Californians to allow him to have a vacation in Southeast Asia. And by the way, he's going to Southeast Asia through Israel, which is the exact opposite way that he would actually get to China to have that conversation with China. He's going to Israel first to then go to China, which means he's going the exact opposite direction. He's on the Pacific coast. He could go to Hawaii and then over to the Philippines and then over to China. That would be the logical way to get to China to have a conversation with the Chinese government. Instead, he is going across the United States to New York to then go over to Europe, to then go into Israel, so that he can then go to China. Why is he doing it in the reversed order, the longer way around? Because he wants to get attention. He wants Democrats to give him money. He wants to make friends. He's doing exactly what Kathy Hochul is doing, which is trying to look like he actually cares, to gin up sympathy and to say, look how much I care about this. He has no influence on international policy. He makes no difference. Hamas does not care. Iran does not care about Gavin Newsom. He's simply there to gain more donations, to try and advance his political ambitions, both in Israel and in China. Again, a nation he has no ability to influence whatsoever. Now, if there's anyone on the left that disagrees with me, if there's anyone, a progressive, a Democrat, Democratic Socialists of America, the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, any of the far left organizations that swamp and fill all of the government in California as well as in New York, if you think I am wrong, please explain to me what impact you think Kathy Hochul or Gavin Newsom would have, considering that they have no power whatsoever. They have no power to influence what's happening internationally. Why are they going? They're going because of politics, because they're political ambition, and they are using taxpayer dollars to do it. They're taking money out of your pocket that is desperately needed to feed fellow Americans, to house fellow Americans. Gavin Newsom isn't trying to clean the streets of human feces that are throughout several cities throughout California. He doesn't care about that. The human defecation on the streets, the homelessness in California. He doesn't care about that because he has a political ambition to try and get to vice president or president. And that's his concern, which is why he's going to Israel. It's why he's going to China. That's my opinion. But that seems to make sense for his actions because he's not helping the Californian people deal with their immediate needs. Just like Kathy Hochul is not dealing with the immediate needs of the people of New York State as she is going to Israel just to get money. Just like Eric Adams went to South America to have a vacation and to raise up funding so that he can go back, so that he can get reelected. This is what I believe. If there is anyone who disagrees with me, I will be happy to have that conversation. And again, this is all in the news. We know this is a fact. We know that they are taking these trips. We know that they are governors and therefore do not have the power to negotiate or to make international policy. It's a fact. I don't care how you might feel about it. I don't care how the left feels about this, that they feel like it's a good thing to do, that they feel better that their political leaders are showing their faces at areas in conflict. They may feel good about that, but it is effectively useless. It is inefficient. It is a waste of money and time, and it actually distracts from the issues at hand, both here in the United States and overseas. They are in the way of international diplomacy and may well be complicating matters by adding their voices in a way that is not in the best interest of the American people or our allies around the world in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, throughout the EU, and the rest of the world. But that's one of the things I wanted to address, and I think that's important. But again, the mainstream news media doesn't want you to have this conversation. They would rather confuse you and make you think that this is a good thing. They want the White House to be able to censor and suppress what you get to hear. And YouTube is more than happy to now acknowledge that and to make that happen. YouTube has actively come out and said they're going to put together a news feed that they have approved of, that they want. Doesn't matter that we have seen NBC admit multiple times that many of their reporters are plagiarizing or just making up stories. We've seen that from the New York Times. We've seen that from CNN. We've seen that throughout the entire major news media, that they have been willing to lie, to make up stories, to plagiarize, to rewrite history just so that they can promote a political ideology. We have seen it over and over again. And yet, those are the voices that are going to be now promoted on YouTube. On every single news feed, they are going to push these organizations down your throat, while at the same time stripping away every other voice that says, well, maybe that isn't the total story. Maybe they've taken something out of context. Maybe they're diminishing a story that you should be paying attention to, like the Ministry of Truth. Something that everyone seemed to be against the first time, but now that it is happening again, now that the White House has been given the green flag to go ahead and to censor the public using tax dollars to limit who can say what about any particular issue, now it's not a big news story. And that kind of brings me to Mark Molinaro, which I was talking about on Friday, both on the Liberty First Foundation roundtable at 9 p.m., which I am a part of, but also earlier in the day, I made a video specifically about Mark Molinaro. Now, many people may be familiar. I've lived in the southern tier of New York for about 20 years. And I was pretty strongly involved in southern tier politics. I've known many members of Congress, current and previous. Several of them I have their personal phone numbers. I've met them in person, off the record and on the record. And I've tried to get them to speak to you through interviews as often as I can. Many of them are reluctant because they're afraid to have a serious conversation that is not pandering to them. That's both on the left and the right. So it's not just Republicans, but Democrats as well. And I can say this about at every level of government, local, state, and federal. Mark Molinaro is one of the individuals who I have followed for several years, who I have met multiple times over the last 7 years when he ran for governor, and also in his run for the New York 19th District as a representative of Congress. And I've met him several times on the campaign trail. He, in fact, on the most recent campaign trail, when he got elected, he came to me, or rather, I came to him and offered him the opportunity to do an interview, which he accepted in person when he was in Binghamton twice, 3 times, that I met him, asked him about the interview. He agreed to do the interview. And to this day, his staff refused to actually set the interview. Representative Molinaro refuses to actually fulfill his promise that he has made several times. Fair enough. I won't hold that against him. He's not the only member of Congress who has gone back on his words, and candidates as well, who have made promises on the record to have an interview and then refused to do so. Anthony Brindisi, a Democrat, was another individual from the New York 22nd District who did the same thing. Very interesting that many of these individuals, when they fail to live up to their promises with me, tend to lose their elections, like Anthony Brindisi. That being said, Mark Molinaro is obviously very much involved in the election of the House Speaker. Now, we were talking about this a bit last week. Why is the House Speaker race so important? Because we have less than 30 days. We have until November 14th to get the funding of the United States government. We are currently in a stopgap measure. We have temporary funding for the United States government. And as of November 14th, the government shuts down. You may not notice anything for the first week, but after that, the impact starts to escalate exponentially. And it starts to affect more and more individuals' lives and more businesses and the economy of the United States the longer it goes forward. It's one of the reasons why the United States was downgraded this year, because the government shuts down in recent decades more and more that we have seen this. It is more common and is now something that every presidency can expect to see happen at least once. Just like every presidency will probably experience an impeachment, or at least an impeachment attempt, at least once going forward. This has now become the new norm for the United States, which makes us more and more like most every other country in the world, very much like most parliamentary systems, what we see throughout the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, name a country. It's what they go through on a regular basis. The problem is, that's not what the United States goes through on a regular basis. We normally have been held to and have attained a higher standard in terms of our government, in terms of its operation, and its ability to continue to function. That's falling apart as our debt climbs to levels that are unsustainable. Well, actually, well past that. We're at $33.5 trillion in debt. That's just the upfront debt. Our total debt is closer to $180 trillion. Let me say that again. We have total debt of approximately $181 trillion. That's about 2 times the entire total money in the world. That's how much debt we're talking about. More than 2 times all the money available in the world is the debt that the United States has. It is unsustainable. And if it were not for the fact that the United States dollar is the currency of the world, we would be a third world nation. And if China and its allies, China, Russia, South Africa, there are 20 countries, they are the BRICS, BRICS, they're attempting to try and usurp the United States as the currency of the world. If they ever succeed, we will be more in poverty than South America was in the 1980s. We're talking about instantly becoming an overnight banana republic. That should terrify people. That should be very terrifying. And the more that we have these government shutdowns, the worse that is. The reason why we're in the middle of this government shutdown, why this crisis, this ticking time bomb is so preeminent, we don't have a House Speaker. And that's an important thing. We need to have a House Speaker. We cannot put a bill in front of Congress and have them vote on the bill without a House Speaker. It's just the structure of our government. It's never been a problem before because we always had a House Speaker. Well, Kevin McCarthy failed a vote of confidence, which should be no one's surprise. It took him 15 votes to get elected as House Speaker. He didn't have a whole lot of confidence in him beforehand. So Jim Jordan, now let me backtrack a little bit, because on the Friday roundtable with the Liberty First Foundation, the question was brought up, well, Mike, Matt Gaetz is the problem. He didn't have a plan. Republicans didn't have a plan when they removed Kevin McCarthy. Of course not. This has never happened before. And I believe, you may disagree with me, when Matt Gaetz had a call of confidence, a vote of confidence made against the House Speaker, which is not unusual. That's happened multiple times in the history of the United States government. It's just never succeeded before. This time it did. And there was no way anyone knew that it would succeed because it's the first time it's ever happened. So I don't think he thought it would happen, that he would actually get to dethrone and remove Kevin McCarthy. I thought he was doing what he thought was a political stunt, basically to put pressure on Kevin McCarthy to try and advance his Freedom Caucus agenda. And it wound up that he got more than he bargained for, because even more people were upset with Kevin McCarthy than just the Freedom Caucus. That being said, it leaves us with no House Speaker. Steve Scalise dropped out, many say because of health reasons, and he has been dealing with many complications from being shot by radical leftists, supporters of Bernie Sanders, that thought that the perfect answer for American politics was to take a firearm and to shoot at Republicans in a baseball field. I haven't forgotten about that. That's the left for you. That being said, so Steve Scalise steps down, Jim Jordan comes up. Mark Molinaro says that he has no objection to Jim Jordan. He supports Jim Jordan, and he voted for Jim Jordan twice. This has been lost in the haze of all the other news about Israel and everything else happening in the world. Mark Molinaro told his constituents he was happy to vote for Jim Jordan, that he supported Jim Jordan. He thought Jim Jordan could do the job, that he had a focus and he could unify the party and the Congress on a focus to help America, to shrink the size of the government, to shrink the spending of the government. Fantastic. On October 16th, sometime between October 16th and October 20th, something changed. Mark Molinaro reversed his position. Suddenly, Jim Jordan, the man that he had confidence in, he no longer had confidence in. Suddenly, he decided that Jim Jordan no longer could unify the United States government. He could not be an effective Speaker of the House. He doesn't have an answer on why. He doesn't answer the question, which no one in the news media will ask, why did you change your mind? What changed from October 16th, after 2 votes previously, after your full-throated support? What changed from October 16th to October 20th? What's different? Mark Molinaro, when he responded to me on Twitter, and again, we will have the links to that in the description at the end of the show, because I only... Oh, wait. I've got my second screen back up. Hang on. That just came back. Bear with me. I got my second screen back. Oh, hell yes. I can show you some of this stuff now. Here we go. Hello. So, oh yeah. So let me go. Let's see. So this is when I was talking about Venezuelans. I was talking about New York Times telling you exactly opposite information than NPR and the Associated Press were when they said that there's 2.4 million versus the 2.2 million as reported by NPR. And we're going to get to that story in 1 second. This is the U.S. inflation aggregated. That's 24% of inflation under the Biden-Harris administration. That's the true figure. We said 17. It's worse than we thought, which is why we're in a recession. Wow, I'm glad I got my second screen. It just popped up, so here it is. Here is YouTube. This is the report from The Verge 4 days ago. YouTube is telling you that they're going to censor, they are going to suppress, that they are going to promote propaganda against your better interest so that they can get more money, and that they are aligned with the Democrats and the White House. And here's the article about the White House saying very directly, the Supreme Court saying that the White House is allowed to use your taxpayer dollars to go to all the social media giants and the news giants and to tell them what is the approved message of the day on all the various issues that affect your life. So these are the news articles. And so I'm talking about my video on Mark Molinaro. And in that video, Mark Molinaro says that he is being physically threatened, that there are physical threats based on the vote for the House Speaker. Again, an incredibly important vote. And here's the thing. Who made the threat? See, Mark Molinaro says there's being threats made. And the way he has stated this, as he is quoted from Fox News, he is saying that it is coming from other members of Congress. But he won't name which members of Congress or which organizations that have access to members of Congress. He won't mention their names. But he's putting that out there as if that is a justification, which is important. That means there's coercion happening in our government, that this is insurrection. He is suggesting in his statement, and in fact he says, that there are individuals who are actively trying to commit an insurrection, the definition of which is a forceful, active attempt to take over the government, to influence the government through the use of force. These are his words from Fox News, as we are showing you right now. But he will not clarify who made these threats, where these threats are coming from, who are the threats targeting. Are they in favor of Jim Jordan? Are they against? Is this the reason why Mark Molinaro suddenly, in the space of 4 days, flip-flopped his position and suddenly is denouncing and no longer supporting Jim Jordan? Or was this just a political tactic to try and get more support for his re-election in 2024? Did he just see that the winds were politically changing and it would be better, more advantageous for his re-election campaign to suddenly take a more establishment position? Or was he threatened, like Senate Democrats were this summer, June 27th, when they were told by MoveOn.org that all of their outside funding to the United States Senate Democrats would be cut off if they did not promote the approved candidate, Joe Biden. That's a fact. We covered that back in June. We were talking to you about that. And that's funding. Is that happening to Mark Molinaro? Was he threatened with a loss of funding? Was he being threatened by party members to take on a more establishment position? Was it just his opportunism looking to be reelected? I don't know. Because as much as we asked Mark Molinaro to respond to us on this, to give us an answer about this, he hasn't. We've asked repeatedly. We've given him, we made this public, our request. He said, well, I just changed my mind. Jim Jordan suddenly stopped being a good answer. What changed? How did you come to that conclusion? You're telling us something happened. What happened? It is important for voters, and I know the voters of Ohio as well as the rest of the United States would want to know what changed. What was so damaging? What information did you get that suddenly made you say that this individual no longer is good for America in this position? It's a critical question, because that may relate to other individuals who are also seeking to gain the House Speaker position that we desperately need. And rather than have the American people force a vote and select someone at the last minute because of an emotional need, because of desperation, because of fear of the government shutting down at a critical time in the world, rather than acting on just emotion, we will be able to act based on information. But Mark Molinaro isn't doing that for the American people. He has failed us to provide that. Now, if Mark Molinaro wants to tell you and me and say, Mike, you've misunderstood, fantastic. Representative Molinaro, I'm happy to hear you. If I have misunderstood, if I am somehow taking you out of context in quoting you, and quoting the sources that have quoted you, if I am somehow misunderstanding it, I'm more than happy to give a correction. I will give you as much time as you need to explain this. But in that explanation, you must explain to us what changed, what is no longer correct about Jim Jordan that you have yet to tell us about. You said your opinion changed. What changed your opinion? What new information changed? Because otherwise, you just changed because the polling, because it wasn't politically expedient for you. Well, that's not really an answer, is it? That's playing politics. That's not the same thing as doing what's in the best interest of the United States government, nor is it relying on the wishes and desires and objectives of your constituents of the New York 19th. You're just reacting to what party line politics are saying. If I'm wrong about this, I'm more than happy to hear from you and again, you can respond on Twitter if you don't want to actually have an interview. Fantastic. You can do it directly in a direct mail, or you can just respond publicly on my Twitter and tell me how I misunderstand. I'm happy to do that. But even if YouTube is trying to censor this, do not believe that voters will not hear this or will not hear about this. You know I've been doing this for 2 decades, Mark. You know that I have a reach in your voter base. Enough people pay attention that they can change this election, you should answer the voters. If not because I'm asking you, it's because you may lose the next election because you won't answer this. And I think it's a critically important question. I don't know if everyone else agrees with me, but I think it is. And I'm happy to hear from everyone to tell me, Mike, well, it's not as important as you think it is. Okay, fantastic. Tell me why. I think it is. When it impacts, because the Speaker of the House impacts where we're spending money. If you want to support, I don't care if you want to support Israel, or God forbid, you want to support Hamas, the terrorist organization, if you want to fund the United States government, if you want to pay for illegal immigrants, or you want to pay for supporting moms who've been thrown out of shelters because of illegal immigrants, if you want to try and address inflation, foreclosures, any of the issues that face America, we can't do any of that without having a House Speaker. This is part of that process. So I do hold, and Mike Lawler, I know John mentioned earlier, Mike Lawler, he's one of several Republicans that also flip-flopped their position, that have come out and said, oh no, Jim Jordan's bad choice. And I thought Jim Jordan was good because he's focused. His goal, and looking at his actual record, and I've addressed this on other programs before, people saying, well, Jim Jordan's not successful. Look at what he's tried to be successful at doing. He wants to shrink the government. The parties don't want to shrink the government, but Jim Jordan has tried to do that. He wants to focus on protecting the free speech. The far left doesn't want to do that. Progressives don't want to do that. They want censorship. We're seeing that in the White House right now, with the Ministry of Truth coming back, the Disinformation Governance Board coming back. We are seeing that in their conversations, as we've seen in the Twitter files and with Facebook and with Google, that they have been actively trying to suppress people's voices and been very successful at that. Not just with this channel, but with any political voice that isn't spouting the approved message. So I think it is very important. I think this is critical. You may disagree with me, and again, I'm happy to hear from Mark Molinaro or his staff, and I will be happy to verbatim provide you with his response, whatever it may be. I'll be more than happy to provide it without edit, as we always have, and Mark Molinaro knows that. But we are seeing, as I mentioned, we are seeing America devolve. When we do not have leadership, strong leadership, effective leadership, we see chaos, not only around the world, but also here in the United States. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we can now see that, and you can see this on the screen here. Hang on a second. There you go. You can see it better now. New York streets are descending into chaos because we're seeing pro-Palestinian rallies. Now, I want you to pay attention to the wording on this. Pro-Palestinian. No, that's not what the rally is. It's a pro-Hamas. It is a pro-terrorism rally. Because we have to be exact, and we're being honest. The reason why they call it pro-Palestinian is to change the way you look at this. That you're going to think of the people of Palestine, well, it's the government of Palestine that we have to deal with, and the government of Palestine is Hamas, and they are a terrorist organization. And they commit acts of terror, as we have seen in Israel most recently, but not the least of the things that they have done. Perhaps even an attack, again, this is speculation on my part, that they're attacking the southern border of the Gaza Strip with Egypt. That they may have, Hamas may have struck against its own people there. And I think it's important that people get reminded, you're not, and when you come out and we see Rashida Tlaib, the Democratic Socialists of America, the far left, the colleges like Tufts, like Harvard, when these colleges are coming out and saying, oh, no, we support Palestine. No, you're supporting Hamas. You're supporting terrorism. You're supporting Iran. Call it what it is. And they won't do that, because if they were to do that, even fewer people than the 26% would approve of what's going on. Only about 23 to 26% of Americans actually support Hamas and or Palestine because they're terrorists. Not the people, the government. And the money is coming from those terrorists. The money is going to them over and over again. And this is why we need our House Speaker back to stop the Biden administration when they're doing things like providing $105 billion in humanitarian aid on top of the $300 billion they have already given to Hamas that they're now going to give to Hamas again. And Hamas uses that money to buy Iranian rockets to attack civilians, over 8,000 rockets. They use that money to commit acts of terror, as we saw, killing somewhere between, again, depending on your source, somewhere between 1,300 and 16, maybe 1,700 individuals in Iran, civilians, children, and taking hundreds of hostages, an unknown, unclear number. At the very least, 200 hostages have been taken by Hamas, being used as human shields. That number may be higher. We're not sure. At least 10 of them, somewhere between 10 and 14, again, depending on the source that you're going with, are American citizens. Not counting everywhere else in the world. But let me continue to move forward. Now, I did mention this a little bit earlier. We do see Governor Gavin Newsom is going to China by way of Israel. And I will ask again, why? I asked the people of California, why? Why is your California governor abandoning the people of California to go halfway around the world in the wrong direction to get to Israel so that he can then go to China to have a conversation with a government he has no power to influence? Why is he wasting the California people's money? And California is broke. California is in debt. But yet we know for a fact he's going to go to China. Why? And he's stopping off in Israel. Why? The state of California isn't able to negotiate with Hamas, period. That's not their position. That's not their, they don't have that privilege, that right, that power. They can't negotiate with them any more than New York City can or New York State. So why is he going to Israel? It's because he wants sympathy, because he wants donations, so that he can turn around and in the next governor's race and in his bid for vice president or president in 2024, he wants to be able to say, oh, when Israel was in danger, when Americans were held as hostage, I went there to do something. Yeah, you did. You know what you did? You got a photo op. You didn't actually do anything effective. You didn't do anything efficient. And that should be the question that the news media should be asking him, and they refuse. They refuse to say, what effectively are you going to do? What efficiently are you going to do? Same thing about his trip to California, to China. When you go to China, what are you going to do that is effective and efficient? Especially since you can't make international policy. It's not in his purview. It's not in his power. What are you going to do that the federal government can't and isn't already doing? Because the answer to that is nothing. He can have whatever conversation he wants to have. He can't do anything. So all he's doing is wasting people's money and taking the opportunity to try and bolster his claim of concern, his emotional manipulation of voters in California and around the nation. And I think he should be called out for it. And if he thinks I am wrong, fantastic. Tell me why. Show me how. Now, where am I at here? Of course, China is a big and preeminent issue. And when I say, okay, Gavin Newsom's going over China, well, China is now having conflict with the Philippines. What is Gavin Newsom going to do about that? It is alleged that China ran into a Philippine Coast Guard ship and into a transport ship, Philippine transport ship, that they were actively being aggressors as they have been throughout all Southeast Asia. They have been challenging Japan, North Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines, which is why each and every one of these nations are militarizing. Why each and every one of these nations have asked the United States to support them, and when Joe Biden has failed to give them confidence, they've all gone and decided to militarize on their own, that they are building up their armies, and all of it is targeted around roughly 2028, that they are targeting 2028 as the time they need to be prepared for an attack from China against all of Southeast Asia. What is Gavin Newsom going to do about that? Why is he going there now? He's not going to stop China from encroaching on and threatening the Philippines. He's not going to stop China from threatening Japan or South Korea. He's not going to stop any of that. Nor is he going to stop China from going by force, as they have promised, as they have directly told the United States and the President of the United States, that they're going to go in to Taiwan by force, that they're going to take over that island, that nation, whether anyone likes it or not. Gavin Newsom isn't going to stop that. He neither has the power nor the capability. So when he says he's going to do something, I have to ask you, what impact is he doing? Besides helping himself, besides promoting himself, what is he actually doing? See, this is something that the mainstream news media should be asking, but they won't ask. They're too busy trying to get an approved message through to you to make you say you should vote for Gavin Newsom, that you should vote for Kathy Hochul, that you should vote for Eric Adams, that you should vote for Democrats. Not that there's a reason why you should, not that they've done anything that's actually helping you, but because it looks good, because it feels like they're doing something, not that it's effective or efficient. And in the meantime, by the way, yet again, I will say, Gavin Newsom's going to Israel, and he's going to go to China. And he can't stop China from putting 6 warships in the Mediterranean, into the Gulf of Iran, and to prevent them from threatening Israel, along with, well, I wouldn't call it the ally, but the support of Iran. Because Iran, through Lebanon and Hezbollah, through the Gaza Strip and Hamas, through Yemen and the Houthis, they're attacking Israel right now, 3 different fronts. And China's right there saying, hey, we will help out. We're going to help with our warships that are in the Gulf, that are right there to help attack Israel. And the United States is in the Mediterranean. And we've already been trying to shoot down missiles that were targeting Israel from Yemen, from the Houthis, who are supported by Iran. Do you see how this gets complicated? And a California governor, a New York State governor, a New York City mayor do not make this situation easier. They make it harder. They make it more complicated. They get in the way. What are they doing? They're making it a situation worse because they cannot make it better. I don't care what their intention is, what they think. They can't do anything to help this. So therefore, they're in the way. They're muddying the waters. They're confusing people on who they need to be talking to and how effectively they can have a conversation. They're in the way. Does anyone disagree with me on that? Because I know YouTube doesn't want you to have this conversation anywhere in the world. YouTube does not want you to think about this. They absolutely do not want the voters in California or New York City or anywhere in the United States. They don't want the European Union or the United Kingdom to think about this. They don't want anyone to realize that we have individuals in the United States who are actively making the world more dangerous by getting in the way of actual conversations of peace, of actually trying to create a ceasefire. They're just in the way. Let me go further. And this is all happening, by the way. And like I said, the Southeast Asia is militarizing. China sees that the United States is stumbling everywhere, whether it's in the Ukraine or what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening with illegal immigration in the United States. China has seen us bumble and stumble throughout the entire Biden-Harris administration with no clear plan, no clear objective other than re-elect Democrats. That's their only message. That has been the only message put out internationally. And it has cost the United States 30,000, more than 30,000 Americans. In 4 nations, we have said this every week for more than 2 years now, that under the Biden administration, he has abandoned Americans, 5,000 Americans in Afghanistan, of which we know hundreds are being tortured by ISIS and Al-Qaeda right this second. That comes from the Department of Justice. That comes from the State Department. That's the United States government telling you Americans are being tortured right now. Biden doesn't care. And the news media doesn't want to talk about it. We have 10,000 Americans that were abandoned in the Ukraine. Joe Biden went on to NBC News talking to Lester Holt in February of 2022 and said, you have to figure out your own way home. The United States government will not help you. They will not save men, women, or children. You just got to figure it out on your own. 10,000 Americans that he abandoned. Then we have this year, in April 2023, 15,000 Americans were abandoned in the Sudan as agents of Al-Qaeda and ISIS came into Africa after being released because of what he did in Afghanistan. When we handed over the prison keys to the Taliban, they released all of ISIS, all of Al-Qaeda that was held in those prisons. They went into Africa and started having wars. They started inciting revolts. And that's what we see in the Sudan, where 15,000 Americans were abandoned by the Biden-Harris administration. Abandoned to find their own way home. And the United States government stopped talking about Sudan. The American news media, the international media the American news media stopped talking about the Sudan, stopped talking about those 15,000 Americans. No, that's not a story to cover anymore. And YouTube and Google, social media, working with the White House, suppressed that. You're not supposed to think about it. You're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to consider how that's influencing China and convincing them that they need to be more aggressive because the United States is going to do nothing. And now we have Iran. We have Israel. We have Americans that were killed and Americans that have been taken as prisoner, as well as Israelis and Germans, Nepalese, United Kingdom, people from around the world, killed, civilians, killed, children, killed, taken prisoner, taken hostage by terrorists, Hamas, that our colleges are telling kids you should be supporting. You should support Hamas as they hold Americans prisoner because of a terrorist action. And Gavin Newsom's going to fix this. Kathy Hochul's going to help this out. Seriously, that's what they're saying. They have the answer. And we know that China, for its part, coming back to that, what's China doing? 1,000, they are saying they are going to have 1,000 nuclear missiles that they are building. They're going to create a nuclear arsenal that will overwhelm all the defenses of the United States. That they, along with North Korea, along with Iran, along with Russia, are setting themselves up to attack the United States if they need to threaten the United States, to make the United States submit. And this is in the news, if you can find it, if you know where to look internationally. Because the news is there. The news is out there. China could have 1,000 nuclear warheads and missiles that can hit the U.S. by 2030. But China is telling you, oh, you shouldn't be talking about this. According to China, you shouldn't have any of these conversations. Yes, China has threatened the United States. Yes, it has been reported internationally, but you're not supposed to talk about that. And China says, no, don't worry. Just because they have 1,000 nuclear missiles, you shouldn't be concerned. You shouldn't have a conversation. You shouldn't be talking about this on TikTok or on YouTube or on Google. And the White House, because they have the Ministry of Truth back in force, YouTube and Google and the left-leaning news media is going to say, that's right, we're not going to talk about this because you might not vote Democrat if you realize they have failed and the United States is in danger, short-term and long-term. Oh, no. They want you to think, no. The only problem with America right now is, of course, it's because of the House Speaker. Republicans don't know what they're doing. There's nothing but chaos. I'm sorry. 1,000 nuclear missiles pointing at the United States, that's chaos. Having Russia, having Iran, having North Korea all target the United States economically as well as militarily, that's chaos. Telling me that Jim Jordan didn't make it through 3 votes where the previous speaker took 15 votes to get in, that's not chaos. That's inconvenient, it's difficult, but it's not chaos. Oh, we have RFK is running as an independent. Cenk Uygur thinks that the Democrats are so weak that he could run for president. Cenk Uygur, the Young Turks. A man who talks about having bestiality. He's literally been on record about bestiality. He's literally said some of the most repugnant things we have ever heard. Ask him about Albania. Yet he thinks Democrats are so weak right now that he literally can get attention by running for president. By the way, I don't think Cenk Uygur thinks he's going to win. It is a desperate plea to try and get attention focused on him, to get attention on the Young Turks, to make himself relevant again, because he's not. Because his unwavering support of Democrats, because that's where all of his funding comes from, his money, the money for his channel, the money that is paying for his lifestyle, it all comes from the Democrat left, from mainstream news media. He is their puppet, their tool, so he has to. So he needs to get more attention, and that's what I think this is all about. He's trying to get more attention, but he's doing it because Democrats are so weak and so disorganized that this is his opportunity. Same reasoning that China and North Korea and Iran and Russia are taking their opportunities. Again, people think I am wrong. I have not turned off the messages. You can type in and say, Mike, I agree, you disagree. I'm happy to hear your voices. If you think I'm misunderstanding this, please, let's have this conversation. But I think this is the real threat to America. This is the real issue we need to be addressing. This is the real issue we need to talk about. That is, of course, assuming that YouTube still has this live on YouTube, assuming that they haven't cut this off, or Facebook hasn't cut this off, which also may be possible. They may have, in fact, shut us down. I don't know. Looks like I'm streaming. I can't be sure. Because you can't trust the streaming numbers, and they've already said they're going to suppress any voice that isn't approved. And I'm not approved. Not for telling you about the truth. And we know this is something that's very serious because around the world, we are seeing the left freak out. They're losing their minds because they are losing power. They have failed in every single nation, every region around the world. the current thing is they're, of course, freaking out because Switzerland is going to be more conservative. Switzerland, a neutral nation, they're looking to elect a more conservative government. And who else has done that? Sweden. Sweden elected a more conservative prime minister. And who else did that? Italy. Italy elected a more conservative government. We are seeing that around the world, more and more leaders in more and more nations, Poland, another great example of that. We're seeing that in the United Kingdom to an extent. We're seeing more of the world is saying these rainbows and unicorns and rosy colored glasses are not actually fulfilling anything. When we hear these left-leaning politicians say, we're doing something, everyone's noticing it's not effective. They're not doing anything that's actually worthwhile. And it's not enough to just say, I'm doing something. They have to do something effective. They have to do something efficient. And they're not. Because they're manipulating us. Because they can say it's their truth. Their truth says they did something important. They did something worthwhile. Reality says they're useless and actually making it worse. And that's why we're seeing so many countries, country after country after country, in South America, in Europe. We're seeing it around the world. Countries are becoming more conservative, but they're also doing it because they are afraid. Because they are seeing that we are facing 3 regional wars simultaneously across the world. It's not World War III. It's 3 simultaneous wars in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Western Europe. It's happening, folks. It's happening before your eyes, and we've been talking about it for 2 years. And week after week, we get more and more evidence that this is coming. And that's why you see that not only is China saying that they are going to invade Taiwan by force, but they're building up 1,000 nuclear weapons. They are building a navy. They're doubling the size of their navy as the United States Navy is shrinking. It's why Japan says they need to have an army for the first time since 1945. Maybe you disagree, folks. I don't know. Maybe YouTube and Google have cut off all the comments. I don't know. But it's not me. I want to hear your voice. From anywhere in the world. Hang on one second. I'm just checking that we're still live, because I'm not sure that we are. Seems like we are. Okay. And it's really interesting because the news media wants to cover up so much of this. They want you to keep saying, "Oh no, but it's about Palestine. Don't talk about what's happening in Russia. Don't talk about China. Don't talk about Iran. Let's ignore all of those things." No. What we're going to talk about is the United States, and Democrats are doing fantastic. Gavin Newsom is a good guy because he's going to go to Israel and then he's going to go to China to waste taxpayer money. Because Eric Adams went to South America and wasted taxpayer money. Because Kathy Hochul's in Israel and she's wasting taxpayer money. Aren't they wonderful? They're doing a great job. And you are a bad person if you don't want to help Hamas. If you don't say Israel is evil, as we can see from the AP, more than 300 people were arrested in a Capitol Hill protest during a ceasefire in the Hamas-Israel war. Let's think about this for a second. And I love this. The way the AP has phrased this, it's very interesting. What happened is there were a bunch of far leftist organizations that are pro-Hamas, pro-genocide, pro-terrorism that invaded the United States government offices and tried to stage an insurrection. Now, I don't say that lightly. I want to be very clear. I'm not saying this lightly. But the media is wording this very carefully. 300 people were arrested. There were more than 300 people who were involved in this process. Over 308 people were arrested, but more than that actually went to Congress, to Capitol Hill, where our members of Congress were, not the actual congressional floor, but to where the offices and where all of our members of Congress are actually at. They invaded the building. Police told them they were trespassing. They were told, do not enter. This is a crime. It is an active act of criminal trespass. They broke into the building, the congressional buildings. They broke in and they swarmed members of Congress, screaming at them, which is intimidation, which is coercion, and stopped those members of Congress from doing their job. And that's why 308 individuals were arrested. In fact, there were at least 5 individuals, according to the AP. There were approximately 5 individuals that were arrested because they assaulted officers. Does this sound like January 6th to you? A group of radicals, going by the definition the Democrats have made about January 6th, a group of radicals entered a government building and confronted elected officials against the law while disregarding law enforcement, and several individuals, about 10% of those that were there, actually assaulted police officers and law enforcement in a physical confrontation so that they could change the way our government operates. Is that not the definition of insurrection as provided by Democrats to the rest of America? Is that not the exact reasoning of January 6th as reported by the mainstream news media, as parroted by Democrats? But yet the AP News calls it a protest and downplays it. And this story, you probably didn't even notice it. You probably ignored it. You didn't notice that this was about a pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism protest, that these individuals in support of terrorism invaded our government offices, interrupted and impeded the ability of elected officials to continue to conduct the business of our government, tried to change the minds of those individuals by force, illegally, and then they were arrested. And I bet you're not going to see those 300 individuals, you're not going to see them sit in a jail cell for 2 years without being brought up on charges, without being actually in front of a court and a judge. You're not going to see them get 5 years, 11 years, 23 years in jail for a coordinated event that was as much of an insurrection, if not more so, than January 6th. And you know why that's happening? Because YouTube is going to censor this. Because YouTube is going to censor this, and the White House is able to push through. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't show you. Why is this happening is because YouTube is able to censor this, and they're going to push through the messaging from the White House. That's why this is happening. And that's why you're not hearing about the 300 pro-terrorist individuals attacking our government, which I think is insane. And I don't care, I know I'm not using the right keywords, and I've said terrorism, I've said all these keywords that YouTube is going to suppress the hell out of, and they don't want anyone to have this conversation because I said Democrats and terrorists and Hamas, and they got to suppress this. You need to think about this. You need to think about how we are seeing the mainstream news media that has been approved is trying to protect Hamas, how they are trying to protect the Biden-Harris administration and Democrats, not to make the world better, but to get you to obey, to get you to approve of their power grab. Again, if there's anyone who disagrees with me, if there's anyone who says, Mike, I just don't see what you're saying. I see the evidence you're providing. I see the factual documentation you are showing me. I just don't get it. I'm happy to go through it. Let's have that conversation. We need to have that conversation. If we're going to preserve our government and our nation and our freedoms going forward, we absolutely must have these conversations. Whether you agree or not, we must have these conversations. Because if we don't, we slip into more and more of an authoritarian government and further away from the Constitution, our rights and freedoms, and the beacon of freedom in the world. Because there is no one to replace us. There is no one who's going to take up the banner when we drop it. No one is going to give people as much freedom as they have in America if America stops giving people freedom. And we are on the path to stop giving people freedom. And it's these little things. The news media is saying, no. These 308 people who were arrested for doing exactly what we were complaining about on January 6th, you know what? They're entirely different. It's okay because they're supporting Hamas, an Iran-backed terrorist organization that killed somewhere around 1,700 innocent civilians, that took over 200 hostages, that killed Americans and have held Americans hostage. You know what? That's okay. Those are the good guys. That's a very odd definition of good guys. That is the most insane definition of good people I have ever heard in my life. Maybe it's me. I know I keep coming back to Iran, what's going on with Iran, Israel, with the conflict in the Middle East, but I'm trying to give you a very large view of how all of these things are interacting together, and it is a negative interaction, how it is harming you. Give you another idea of what I'm talking about. So we may remember that when Senator Dianne Feinstein, after she was being puppeted around Congress, literally being told what to say, how to vote, how she needed to stand, and she was being told to puppet the Democratic Party line, something that individuals like, Maria Maynor out of Georgia left the Democratic Party for the same thing, that she was a puppet. So she was told what to say, how to vote, and it was all about the party line, had nothing to do with her views or her constituents. We saw the same thing happen to Dianne Feinstein. In the last moments of her life, she was being moved around like a puppet. And she died. And she was replaced by LaFonza Butler. And at the time, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about this, and I said very clearly to the public, and I said, this is a diversity hire. She is a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion hire. She is unqualified for the job, that she should not have this position, that this is an insult to black women, to politicians, to people of California. It is an insult to everyone, including LaFonza Butler, because she was being used by Gavin Newsom and the Democratic Party. Okay. Last week, I had a meeting with individuals who are connected to the Democratic Party. Individuals that are, who know LaFonza Butler, who are directly, they've been directly connected to her. And they were talking to me last week, Thursday, about her campaign, about the fact that she is now a senator and would she seek re-election. And I think I hinted at this last Sunday that she was looking to go forward. That last Sunday, I think I mentioned that she was looking for re-election, that she believed she could make a serious change, and that the individuals I have spoken to, the inside sources I've spoken to, said, no, she's a serious candidate. She is a serious individual in the political sphere, that she actually believes in what she stands for and she can be effective. And that's based on a conversation I had on Thursday. And I was reassured that this was more than just the politicking of saying, hey, here's a black lesbian who works with unions. It's not just about getting unions on the side of Gavin Newsom, not just about getting unions satisfied about having more power in California. No. This wasn't about the show. She actually has substance. And then this week, much in line with my conversation privately last week, Thursday, she's out the race. She can't raise the money. She has too much blowback from Adam Schiff and, more importantly, Barbara Lee, the Democrat in the Black Caucus, who believes that she is entitled to the position that LaFonza Butler now has. And it's Adam Schiff and Barbara Lee are in a big battle trying to get that Senate seat. Adam Schiff, of course, has a lot of friends that he's made in Congress. Why? Because he was the one who said for 3 years in a row on Rachel Maddow's program on the left-leaning news media saying, well, there's Russia collusion, which has stuck. People actually believe, Democrats actually believe that the Trump administration was colluding with Russia, which is a proven fact. 4 different investigations, over $35 million of U.S. taxpayer dollars prove without a shadow of a doubt, no, it wasn't Trump's collusion. There was collusion. It came from Democrats. It came from the Hillary campaign. That is a fact. They lied that the Hillary campaign, the Democratic National Committee, that they lied to the American people. They lied to the FBI and the CIA, that they colluded to mislead the American public. And if we must have a misinformation governance board, this is what they should be targeting, the Democratic Party, for what they have done to the American people in 2016. That's not what we're going to get. That's not what they're doing. But instead we get what's happening here with LaFonza Butler. Barbara Lee is pissed off because a younger black woman is stealing her thunder. Barbara Lee, this is my opinion, this is my understanding of the inside battle within the Democratic Party, the chaos in the Democratic Party that isn't reported on by the mainstream news media. Representative Barbara Lee believes she is entitled. She has spent her time in the Democratic Party. She's been reelected over and over again. If any black woman is going to be elected to the United States Senate for California, she thinks it should be her. Even though she's not gay, but she is a Democrat and she does work with unions. So she wants it. Even though she's older, she wants the position. And LaFonza Butler being put between Adam Schiff and Barbara Lee and not having the support of the Black Caucus, she can't raise the money. She may be brilliant. I know my sources are telling me she's actually a very brilliant, very smart woman. She may be somewhat effective, as I have heard from sources that are connected to various unions that have said she's been effective at being able to push forward union goals and ideas in negotiations. She may be someone that Californians might like if they ever found out who she was or spent the time, because she's been in Maryland. She's not been in California. She's not a Californian. She's a Maryland. But we will never know, because she was put between a political rock and hard place, and she is being squeezed out, which just confirms in my mind she was a diversity hire. She was used. She was used for being black, a woman, gay, and connected to unions. She was used. And this is in the backdrop. This is the stuff that the White House is now telling news media and the internet not to talk about, to kill that story. That's why LaFonza's news that came out on Friday, no one really noticed. Oh, we don't want to talk. We can't talk about a black woman being used as a puppet, as a tool to just gin up black voters for the next election. That she was just keys jangling in front of Democrats and progressives to get them to make donations and to be involved. She's useless. I know. Some people will say, well, Mike, that's kind of harsh. No, it's not. It's not harsh. It's realistic. This is the truth of what's happening in our government right now. This is how we are being abused and misused, and how we are seeing our government become corrupted. Is LaFonza Butler the best person? I have no idea. I don't think so. I don't think she's the best choice whatsoever. I think that if you wanted to find a black Democrat female who's gay and works with unions, there are probably tens of thousands of them in California. You didn't have to go to Maryland to find her. They're already there. They just didn't want to pick them because LaFonza Butler has better connections. She has better press credentials. She's been through the process enough that she can actually look good on TV. She was the right face of this. But it's still an abuse. And it's insulting. I think LaFonza Butler should feel insulted by this whole thing. And I really don't think that YouTube or Google like me saying this about her. I'm sure that they are really pissed off right now that I've mentioned this, because I think they've shut me down on at least one of the channels. Looks like they're not letting me stream on YouTube because YouTube wants to suppress and not have you think about it. You're never supposed to question, oh, it's a black gay woman. It has to be good. She has to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Doesn't matter how she's been used and abused. Doesn't matter. She's the best thing. And you can't question it. You can't bring up how she has just been abused and tossed to the side. Wasted. All right. I also wanted to remind everyone, and this is kind of important. Remember, just before what's happened with Iran and Hamas, the Biden-Harris administration has been announced that they were able to get 5 hostages back from Iran, that Iran had 5 Americans that they were holding hostage. We gave Iran $6 billion. We gave them $6 billion. We got back 5 hostages, and Iran is supposed to say that they agree with the Iran nuclear deal and the deal will be back, that the United States can sign the Iran nuclear deal. That was the week before Hamas decided to attack Israel, because Israel at the same time was making a deal with Saudi Arabia to increase the amount of peace in the Middle East. And Iran didn't like that. But I want you to remember, as we are seeing Joe Biden try and get $100 billion of your tax dollars and give it to Hamas, a terrorist organization, as he is trying to do that, and I will explain that in a second, but as he's trying to give $100 billion to Hamas, to terrorists, I want you to understand, he also told us that Iran, he would not do any business with Iran, that no sanctions would be lifted because Iran kills women. Iran kills schoolgirls and poisons them because they dare to learn how to read. Iran stones women to death because they dare to have their hair exposed. And now we get to see Iran is sentencing women into jail for daring to tell people in the newspapers the evils of the Iranian government. Again, not the people, but the Iranian government. The religious extreme, the Ayatollah, Prime Minister Raisi, that these are the evils that they are willing to do against women, against other Iranians. And the Biden administration says, we're not going to talk about that. But remember, it was the Biden administration that promised you that they were not going to do business with Iran, that they would not release any funds, they would not try and give them any sanctions. Remember, it was 2 weeks ago that the Biden administration gave $6 billion to Iran, that Iran, Prime Minister Raisi of Iran on NBC said they're going to use that money however they want, including to use it to promote terrorism through the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, that they could use the money any way they wanted to. And they were right. Because there's no way, once they take the money, there's no way to stop how they will use it. Just like Hamas getting humanitarian aid. There's no way to stop them from spending the money on more rockets. You can't stop them. And here it goes. So people will say, well, no, but all of that was in the past. No, it's not. Here's the news right now. See, if it weren't for what happened with Israel and Hamas, we would be hearing from the Biden-Harris administration right now that they're willing to sign the deal. They paid for hostages and a signature on a contract that says there's an Iran nuclear deal. And Iran said, give us the money. More global terror, give us the money. And if it weren't for what happened with Israel, we would have this deal. And then we get this news that Iran is continuing to do the very thing that Joe Biden in December of 2022 told us he wouldn't do business with Iran for. He said to us, the Iran deal is dead. The Iran nuclear deal is dead as long as Iran is punishing women for daring to read and to show their hair. That he would not stand for that because he stands by women. Yet he gave Iran $6 billion and they're still going after the women. Where's the National Organization of Women? Where are all these women's rights groups? Why are they not screaming? Why are they not upset? Oh, because Joe Biden did something. Because he is a Democrat. Because he is being progressive. Because we're not supposed to talk about it and we're not supposed to think about it. We're not supposed to see this news from Reuters, from overseas, that the American news media doesn't want to talk about, that it's not approved. You have to go overseas. You have to go to Reuters to see this article to even know that this happened. You're not supposed to know this. You're not supposed to think about this. It's not been approved for Americans to consume and to consider. That's why it's being suppressed. That's why you're being suppressed, and that is how you get oppressed. And this channel is being oppressed right now. By the way, please, if you're with us this far, we've been almost an hour and 45 minutes. Please like, share, and subscribe. Because as you can see, and as I'm seeing it seems, we're being suppressed. YouTube has already told us they're going to suppress any political commentary and speech that isn't coming from the mainstream media. They're going to suppress anybody that has a view or an opinion that isn't already approved. That means you don't get a voice. Please like, share, subscribe. You may not agree with me, and that's okay. I'm not telling you you have to. I'm not telling you you have to be a conservative or Republican or libertarian or anything else. You can be whatever you want to be. You can disagree with me on the facts. We can go through that. You can disagree with the conclusions. Let's have that conversation. But we should be able to have that conversation without YouTube saying, no, you don't need to know that. Because if it were up to YouTube, if it were up to the White House and the disinformation governance board, if it were up to the Ministry of Truth of the Biden-Harris administration and the Democratic Party, you would never know that Iran continues to oppress women. You would only know that the deal went through. Isn't it great? Biden increased the world's peace. No, he helped to allow women in Iran to be punished, to be subjugated, to be abused. That's what he's doing. He's helping to fund global terror. That's what he's doing. And you would never know that because they're going to silence every single voice. And just to make sure you're going to vote the right way in 2024, that you're going to vote Democrat in every single election. You're going to vote and you're going to lean towards the Democratic Socialists of America. Don't think about the fact that they just had 308 of their members arrested for doing January 6th insurrection. That the very definition of insurrection, just like Jamal Bowman, oh, you're not supposed to think about that. You're not supposed to have that conversation. You're just supposed to say, it's okay when the left does it, but if it's someone on the right or in the center, oh my God, then it's just evil. The world is ending. Again, if you think I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear your voices. I want people to tell me what you think about this. I really do. And if you can't do it live because it's being suppressed by YouTube, because it's being suppressed by Facebook, it'll be on Rumble, it'll be on BitChute. I'm going to put this out in all the social media that I can, and I look forward to seeing your comments after the fact, because I always look at all your comments. Of course, let me also mention, this is expensive. Obviously, they don't want me to be able to get monetization for any of our videos, any of the work that we do, the live streams or anything else. They don't want you to be able to have this content. They want me to be broke. So if you can join our Patreon. It's $1.50 a month. That's it, $1.50. We're not like Netflix. We're not like Hulu or Disney Plus, where we're trying to manipulate your emotions and shove propaganda down your throat and charge you $15, $20, $25 per month for content you don't watch and you don't like. If you can, that's fantastic. If you can't, just give us a like, a share, subscribe. That's all we ask for. All right. So we've talked about Lufthansa. We're talking about what's happening in Iran. Again, all of the links will be in the show afterwards. But since we're talking about Iran, since we're talking about paying for hostages, which we know the Biden administration will do, that they have already done that they spent $6 billion for 5 prisoners from Iran, which really wasn't. It was just a way, it was just an excuse to be able to give them $6 billion to convince Iran to sign the nuclear deal, the Iran nuclear deal. But it set a precedence that the Biden administration, they will either abandon 30,000 Americans without a moment's notice, just ignore them completely, or if it's politically expedient, they're going to pay through the nose. They are willing to spend stupid amounts of money, your tax money, to buy back hostages so that Biden looks good, looks like he cares, looks like he did something effective, that he got Americans back home. He didn't get the Americans back home who are being tortured in Afghanistan right now. That news report came out this spring. We have yet to hear that the CIA, the State Department, the DOJ, no one has reported that those 200 Americans being tortured in Afghanistan by ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Joe Biden hasn't got a single one of them back home. Not one. But he got 5 people from Iran, and he got 2 Americans back from Hamas. 2. Mind you, that's great. I'm happy he got someone back home, that they're no longer being used as a human shield. They're no longer being abused and dragged through the streets. And God help us, some of these women have been raped. That's no longer happening. I'm happy. I'm happy that those 2 women are able to come home and no longer have to go through that torture and that hell. But let's be honest. That's just 2. How many more Americans are being held over there? I believe this is saying, this is according to, and again, different sources will give you different numbers, but again, coming from NPR, We got the 2 American hostages. Now look at this. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The 14th article. 14th article in this news account before they mention this is about hostages. This is about the Americans who have been taken hostage by the terrorist organization Hamas. You would think they would tell you up front that they aren't the only 2 Americans. They are phrasing this, they are wording this, they are putting this in front of you as if all the hostages have now come home. No, they haven't. Not nearly. This is maybe 1% of all the hostages. And again, depending on which news source you are going by from different parts of the world, there may be far more than just 200 hostages. We don't know for sure. But given, let's say it's 200 hostages, Joe Biden got 2 people home. 2. Only 2. And there's at least 200 over there. It's buried in the story because you're not supposed to think that Joe Biden's being ineffective, that Joe Biden isn't getting the job done. Something else that you may recall last Sunday, when we found out that Secretary of State Antony Blinken extended his stay in the Middle East. We told you last Sunday, you can look it up. You will see this in the live stream. And I said, they're making a deal with Hamas. This is about hostages. Antony Blinken stayed in the Middle East so that he could reach out to Hamas and make a deal with Hamas to get those hostages back. That's why he was still there. That's what he did. And apparently, I was correct. That is exactly it. Because then Joe Biden shows up and suddenly there is a deal. He gives $105 billion to Hamas in humanitarian aid, and we get 2 hostages. Not all the hostages, not all the Americans that are being held hostage. We just get 2, with the hope that we will get more. And I truly believe, it is my belief. You can tell me if you disagree. You can tell me if you think I am wrong. But I truly believe that what has happened is these 2 hostages, I think there's well more than 10 Americans that are hostage. I think there are more than 200 individuals from around the world that are being held hostage by Hamas as human shields. I think it's well over 200. And I think that these 2 are the good faith giveaway to give Biden some positive news, some press, positive spin politically, so that he can say, I need more money that we have to give to Hamas. That here's $105 billion. We have to give them more than $105 billion. We have to give them more and more aid, and we'll get more and more of those hostages back. And I think that they said, well, here's 2 hostages. Make sure the $105 billion goes through. Make sure that you give us the money. And when you give us the money, then we'll give you more hostages, which may be attached to even more money going to Hamas. Let me address something, because I've been saying that Hamas is getting the money. Let me be clear about that, because I know people will say, but Mike, the money is not going to Hamas, it's going to NGOs, it's going to non-governmental agencies. It's not the UN and the United States. They're not giving the money to Hamas, they're giving it to the Palestinian people. First of all, that's a lie. Anyone who tells you that the international aid is going to the people, and I've had this conversation even with my Lunch with Larry Sharp live stream. I've had this conversation with some individuals there. We're not giving the money to the people of Palestine. It's not like all of a sudden you're in Palestine and you have a bank account and suddenly your bank account just has another extra $1,000 or $5,000 that came from the United States. That's not happening. We don't do that. No government does that. Governments give governments money. We give the money to organizations that are connected to governments. And Hamas has two parts. Hamas is a military terrorist organization, and they are the government of Gaza. Let's be very clear. So the government of Gaza, who say they are not terrorists, get money. And they give it to the militant terrorist wing of Hamas to buy rockets to kill innocent civilians and babies. That's a fact. When we hear that the UN is giving it to NGOs, I don't care where they're trying to put it, that money always comes back to the government. It may take a step or two. It always comes back to the government. Where is it? In fact, where is it? I wanted to share this with you guys. And so this is Biden's part of the deal. $100 billion. Have to give them $100 billion to get 2 hostages. $105 billion. So the numbers are going up. The more it's being reported, the more the number goes up. So the number is changing as we speak. But this comes from, I believe this is Foreign Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations. Okay? From their source, what is Hamas? Hamas is 2 different organizations. They originally came from the PLO, a terrorist organization, the Palestinian Liberation Front. That's back in the 1980s. For those of us who are old enough to remember that, I am. Remember the 1980s, Yasser Arafat. You may remember that. And in this, and I think it's very important, how is Hamas funded? And it says here, in addition, some Islamic charities in the West have channeled money to Hamas-backed social services groups, prompting asset freezes by the United States. So we have charities, we have the NGOs, the very organizations that the UN and the United States are giving money to, give the money to Hamas. It's that simple, folks. The NGOs give the money to Hamas because they are part of Hamas. They are part of the government, and the government is a terrorist group. So when I say, and as I have been saying, that Joe Biden is giving money to Hamas, I mean exactly that. Whether it's happening directly, and that's where you hear the news media, this is where you hear the fact checkers come in and say, well, no, they are not directly giving the money to Hamas. Well, yeah, they do actually give some money directly to the government of Palestine, of the West Bank, and that is Hamas. So they do directly give money to Hamas, but also the NGOs give money back to Hamas. So indirectly, they are funding terrorism as well as directly funding terrorism. That's a fact. It's not a new thing because under the Biden administration, Obama did the same thing. Because when we had the Iran nuclear deal, then Secretary of State John Kerry on CNBC, January 16th of 2016, said that the Iran nuclear deal helped to fund international terror. That is a fact. The United States was indirectly funding terror with the Iran nuclear deal. Same thing that's happening here with Hamas. Whether you want to say it's direct or indirect, at the end of the day, Hamas, the terrorist organization, is getting more money from the United States, from Joe Biden, to buy more Iranian rockets to kill innocent civilians. He is helping to increase the net amount of terror in the world, which is killing Americans. There is no other way to say that. And I am sure that the fact checkers will be very upset and say, well, no, you're taking it out. No, that is the context. That is the process. That is the process that has been proven and reported over and over again around the world. We have seen this in many nations. We have seen this with these nations. We know that this is how the money is funneled. It's just not good news for Democrats. Once you realize that, once you understand that this is how they funnel money into these terrorist organizations, well, now you don't have the same opinion of the Biden administration or this humanitarian aid. I'm sure a professor at a college will say, well, no, you just don't understand. It's going to this humanitarian organization. And where does the money go after that? It goes to buy food. Are you sure? Are you sure that's where all the money goes? There's no money being siphoned off by Hamas? There's no money that's being given to terrorism? Because you're a liar if you say that. Because that's not factually correct. Because it has been shown over and over again for decades that the money does get siphoned off, that the money is used like that. Just like how Iran said when they get the $6 billion, they will use it for anything they want. Because once you give them the money, you can't stop where the money goes. It's just that straightforward. And I know that the Disinformation Governance Board does not want you to have this conversation, does not want you to know that this conversation exists. They do not want you to think about this. They want you to watch a football game. They want you to watch the housewives of wherever the hell. They want you to talk about MILF Manor, as disgusting that is. They want you to talk and think about anything and everything else except what are the consequences of what is happening. How ineffective is this? How is doing something is actually hurting you? They are doing something that hurts you, that makes your life unsafe. Hey, John. John Cordisco has joined us. Well, I'm glad that you commented, John. I wasn't sure. For a while there, it looked like YouTube shut me down for at least part of the time that I've been speaking today. I've been covering a lot of stuff over the last 2 hours. A lot of information. How you doing, John? John Cordisco he has Cordisco's Corner, also a political commentary. And by the way, John, how do you feel about the fact that YouTube has come out and said that they're going to suppress and censor your channel and my channel, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, The Quartering, The Lotus Eaters. They're going to suppress all of us, probably Nerdrotic. They're going to suppress Mahler. They're going to suppress everybody who has ever said anything even slightly political. And they're getting the ability to do this because the Supreme Court just said that it's okay for the White House to collude with social media companies and the news media to suppress your voice. Tell me, John, how do you feel about that? I look forward to seeing your comment about that one. Because John has a channel too, and he's going to be hurt just as much as anyone else, if not more than me. But yeah, I am really upset that when we keep hearing all this about the funding of Hamas, and we're told, no, we're not funding terrorism. Yes, we are, indirectly. The $100 billion that's coming from the Biden administration is going to Hamas. Every single penny? Maybe not. But it's going to go, and it's going to buy more rockets. It's going to fund more terror in the world. And no one who actually follows international politics will be able to look you directly in the face and tell you that's not a fact. They're lying to you if they try and tell you otherwise. And it's not. And here's one of the things that gets me really upset. We know that Egypt, all the Middle East, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, they are, not one of them is trying to help Palestine. They closed their borders. Remember, Egypt's border crossings open to a trickle. It's not because Egypt couldn't open up the borders. And remember, they closed the borders at first. They locked the Palestinians in. They didn't want the refugees. Jordan doesn't want the Palestinian refugees. Lebanon doesn't want the Palestinian refugees. But they do want to attack Israel. And we know that as of the beginning of this show, that there was a bomb. Palestine is upset, or at least Hamas is upset, it seems, with Egypt and the aid that's coming through. That's why they had a bombing of that earlier today. Hang on a second. And we know that many countries have already admitted, but you didn't see Egypt open up its doors when Hamas struck their own hospital, when we've seen 500 of the 8,000 rockets hit the Palestinian people by Hamas. You didn't hear Egypt, you didn't hear Lebanon, you didn't hear Iran, you didn't hear Jordan step up and say, oh, that's terrible, that's horrible, we have to protect those people. They let it go. When the missiles were being fired by Yemen at Israel, you didn't hear anyone screaming about that, saying, why is Iran, the Houthis? This is, do I have it up? Yeah. Let me see if you can hear this.
That were launched by Houthi forces in Yemen. This action was a demonstration of the integrated air and missile defense architecture that we have built in the Middle East and that we are prepared to utilize whenever necessary to protect our partners and our interests in this important region.
So this is
there were no casualties.
The United States government. That the USS Gerald Ford, our aircraft carrier, the U.S. Sixth Fleet in the Mediterranean, protecting Israel. Why? Because Houthis, Iran-backed militia, their Iran-backed terrorists, were firing even more rockets from Yemen at Israel. And at the same time, Hezbollah in Lebanon is firing missiles at Israel. And we have Hamas firing rockets at Israel and keeping human shields and killing civilians. This is all Iran. Iran is at the center of all of this. But no one wants to talk about that because there's the Iran nuclear deal, and the Biden administration wants that deal. And Hezbollah. We know Hezbollah has jumped into this. I'm sorry, went the wrong way. Hezbollah, and then there's U.S.-led troops. We're being told to stay out of it. Why? Because suicide drone attacks, Iranian drones, are being used to attack Americans in Iraq to keep us passive, to keep us out of the fight. We're not supposed to be involved in this. Iran wants us complacent. Meanwhile, Harvard and many of these colleges, the Democratic Socialists of America, the far left, are telling us, no, but you should be supporting terrorism. I don't get this. John Cordisco says, this is all just the same soup, just reheated. I agree with you. But we need to address it. We need to take it on. We need to face this. I mean, the media is getting away with this because people aren't talking about it. I mean, look at this. In Iran, we know that a teen she was made brain dead because people could see her hair. This is something that the Biden administration said they would not do any business. They would not work with Iran. They would not lift any sanctions if Iran continued to torture women. This is a teen girl. She has been made brain dead. Essentially, she was killed because of her hair in Iran. But meanwhile, we paid Iran $6 billion to get 5 hostages back, and we are paying the Iran-funded terrorist organizations, Hamas, We're giving them $105 billion to get 2 hostages. Does this make sense to anyone? Why would we do this? Because no one in their right mind would do this. That's why I had to do the video about the reaction for Hamas, where we're seeing college students being taught, we're seeing high school students are being taught that they have to support terrorism, that's the right thing to do. Because they don't understand the consequences, because they're not seeing the news, because White House is selecting what stories are getting in front of you, because people aren't hearing about Iran beating women to death, to brain death, because they can see their hair and they are funding Hezbollah and Hamas and Yemen as they attack civilians. Those college students, they don't notice that. They don't pay attention to that. Why? Because their teacher didn't tell them about that. Their teachers who are so busy. Look at this. This is from Cornell. Student 1, a Cornell University history professor, was fired because he called Hamas exhilarating and energizing. This is what's happening to your kids. This is how they are being indoctrinated. That this history professor is like, isn't this energizing? Aren't you energized by seeing the people who beat women into brain death are now attacking innocent civilians and killing babies? Aren't you exhilarated and excited? We should give more money to Hamas. We need to re-elect Biden. We need to re-elect Democrats so that they can give more humanitarian aid to Hamas so that they can go out and kill more children. Mike Bowie says, I want to know, how are they treated? How are they treating the other hostages? No reasons not to report on this. That has been vague and sparse. As far as I can tell, no one has actually addressed how the Americans, the 2 women who are being returned, I'm not seeing news about the details of how they were treated as a hostage or if they were able to see other hostages. It appears that they were, again, this is still developing, but it appears that they were not held with other American hostages. It appears that they have not been asked about whether they were physically or sexually abused. If they were beaten, we don't know. That hasn't come out. We are hearing that they are happy to be back home. We are hearing that they are in good health now, but it's unclear. And their experience doesn't mean that the other 198 hostages, at least, are having the same experience. Because we have seen at the very beginning of this war, Mike Bowie, so I want to answer your question. At the very beginning, remember, we saw a German woman being dragged through the streets who was stripped of clothing and appeared to have been sexually assaulted as she was dragged through the streets in Gaza as she's being held for a human shield. We've seen this. She was a German citizen. She was identified. So we know at least some of these hostages have been abused and that they are being used as human shields, all of them, and that some of them have been sexually abused. So we still don't know. And the media really doesn't want to tell. Jason from Bing says, hey, Jason. Jason says, why were they let go? Because Biden gave $105 billion to Hamas. Or directly or indirectly, he has given $105 billion to Hamas. That's why. To pay for play. Just like Iran got $6 billion for 5 hostages and a sanction, Joe Biden got it. We knew this from, remember, last Sunday. Let me say it again. Last Sunday, we knew this was coming. It was telegraphed. What we saw was Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, extended his trip. he was talking to Hamas. He was making the backdoor deal saying, if we give you funding, you will give us hostages. You'll give us the American hostages. Now, mind you, this has now set a precedent. I'd be very angry if I was in the United Kingdom, the Germans, the Nepalese, every other government now it's been established that at the cost of about $50 million per hostage, you can get your hostages back too. All you have to do in the United Kingdom is fund Hamas with $100 billion, and you can get 2 of your hostages back too. If you happen to be in Germany, you just have to give it 100 billion Deutschmarks, and you can get 2 or 3 of your hostages back too. This is for less than a handful of people, and think about all the different nations that have hostages that have been taken as human shields and abused by Hamas. Think about these numbers. And think about how much terror is going to be. Think about it. They're buying rockets with this money. How many rockets do you think they're going to now have? It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Again, it's just logical. We are using the facts that are in front of us. We know it has been proven many of these charities are giving their money back to Hamas, the terrorists. And the terrorists are buying rockets from Iran, and they're giving those, and same thing happening in Hezbollah, same thing with the Houthis. These are all Iran-backed terrorist organizations, and they're all attacking. And we are just giving more and more money to this. And we have college professors who are saying, it's a great day. In Cornell University, he's energized. Imagine if this one professor at Cornell University is energized and found it exhilarating. Imagine what about the rest of the staff? What about at Harvard University? Where we see, where is it? Where's that article? Here it is. Harvard. The president has to condemn anyone who would question the 31 organizations, the students of Harvard, as they rally for Hamas, as they rally for global genocide. Let's remember, Hamas has said that this is a genocide. I know, Rashida Tlaib is like, oh my God, it's so terrible. What did, I have it here. I want you to see. By the way, I'm not the only one who thinks this is insane and terrible. I'm not the only one who's saying that this is wrong. We can go to Democrats. This is a Democrat. This is, what's her name? Sorry, Wasserman Schultz. This is a Democrat, Florida Democrat, and I want you to hear what she had to say here.
They don't pay attention to anything like that. They came in and they massacred 1,300 Israelis just because they were Jewish, and captured 200 and still hold, all of them except for 2. What my colleague is doing is fanning flames that I'm sure is resulting in more people dying, endangering people's lives. Fanning those flames, that is outrageous, and to suggest that Americans don't.
And this is Wasserman Schultz talking about Rashida Tlaib, a member of Congress who is fanning, I'm quoting Wasserman Schultz here, that Rashida Tlaib is fanning the flames of violence, and people are dying because of this. Where is it? And we're seeing people like a man slugged a woman in the face in New York City subway because she's Jewish. That's because of Rashida Tlaib. That's because of the Democratic Socialists of America. That's because of Cornell's history professor. That's because of Harvard University's support of Hamas. This is what's happening here. Do I have it? So where is... I have it here somewhere. Here it is. Nope. There it is. Bear with me. I've got this article here. It's Rashida Tlaib herself. I thought I had... No, that's Berkeley. Where is it? I apologize. I had an article with Rashida Tlaib herself trying to justify... where she's trying to justify her violence. She's crying and saying, "Oh, it's so terrible. What's happening to Hamas, the terrorists? The terrorists are being hurt. Hamas, the terrorists who killed their own Palestinian people with 500 rockets, that blew up their own hospital. Hamas did that. Hamas has human shields. Hamas killed babies without warning. They targeted civilians without warning, without any cause." Oh yeah, Rashida Tlaib is upset about Hamas. She's right there with Harvard University. She's right there with Cornell University, Tufts University. And anyone who objectively looks at this, even Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, has to say, this is just evil. This is wrong. And when we see the violence like we see in New York City, where a woman is being punched because she's Jewish, that's the result. Oh, but Harvard says it's not their fault. You're going to hear from Cornell, well, that's not what he intended. Seems like that's exactly what they intended. So did I answer the question for you, Mike Bowie? Did I answer the question for you, Jason? Let me know. I think I did. And again, we've been talking here for about 2.5 hours. I've been covering a lot of details. And you will see at the end of the show, I'll have all the links of every international source that I am using. They are all internationally credible. Almost every single one of them is a left-leaning international source. This isn't some conservative view. This isn't some kind of wild conspiracy. It's not coming from QAnon. This is from the left-leaning news media from around the world. You're just not supposed to know. That's why it is being suppressed, because you're not supposed to read about it. You're not supposed to think about it, and God forbid, you're not supposed to talk about it. So Jason says, so they paid for the hostages. Yes. Yes, they did. Very, very directly, yes. Now you're going to hear from the State Department, Antony Blinken. You're going to hear from Joe Biden. We have already seen several of the fact checkers have come out and said, no. They didn't pay for hostages. They're giving humanitarian aid, which that money goes back to Hamas. That's why Antony Blinken extended his trip into the Middle East. This is where he was having the conversation. That's where the deal came from. Because it wasn't like Joe Biden showed up and Hamas just said, hey, we're just going to give up 2 of our hostages. Didn't happen. No one is afraid of Joe Biden. No one is worried about his international policy. Didn't happen. Antony Blinken was there to make a deal. He did make the deal. The deal was give them money, we get hostages. That's exactly what happened. But they're going to tell you, no, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen because we don't give money to Hamas. We give money to the government of Palestine. That's Hamas. That is Hamas. Oh, we give money to the NGOs who give the money back to the government of Hamas. It's just a matter of red tape and playing with the numbers, of hiding where the money goes. But we've seen this happen with North Korea. We've seen it happen with Iran. We have seen this happen with various countries throughout all of Africa. This is how the money gets shifted around, and you give it to an NGO, you give it to the government, and it gets shifted and sent into the terrorists. Mike Bowie says, I see an ever widening gap between good and evil in my lifetime. Evil justifies sexual assault and murder and kidnapping, and they are celebrated at Harvard, at Cornell, at Tufts University, at universities across this nation, and at high schools, by the way. There's also Beverly High students. Berkeley High students walk out to protest Israel's bombardment of Palestine. They didn't walk out when Hamas killed babies. When 40 babies were beheaded, Berkeley High didn't have a problem. They didn't protest that. They didn't protest 1,300 innocent civilians killed. They didn't protest 230 civilians killed at a music festival enjoying their lives mowed down by Hamas. They didn't protest that. They didn't protest, and they aren't protesting 200 hostages being taken by Hamas and used as human shields, and some of them being sexually abused, if not physically abused. They didn't protest that. They're protesting that Israel is trying to defend itself. That's where they're upset. Mary says, all the brainwashing, it's absolutely frightening. It is frightening. It's terrifying. And again, the information is there available to you, except I keep mentioning, we now have the Ministry of Truth back in effect. The Disinformation Governance Board from the Biden-Harris administration has just been turned back on. We have YouTube at the same moment that the White House is able to say, this isn't something we approve of, don't talk about it. YouTube has turned around and said, hey, by the way, we're only going to have approved news media that's going to be put in front of people, whether you want it or not. If you look for news, you're only going to get the approved message, not the actual people. People like myself, like John Cordisco, like the Lotus Eaters, like Nerdrotic, like The Quartering, like Steven Crowder, like Ben Shapiro. You're not getting any of those voices. Hell, you will get the Young Turks. They're on the approved list. You're going to get people like that, which are on the left. They're approved. But everyone who's not approved, everyone who has a point of view, Malkin, Mike Malice, Mark Malkin, you're not going to get any of them because they're unapproved. That's called brainwashing. No wonder we have kids in high school who think that they're celebrating terrorism. They don't even realize they're celebrating terrorism. Because the news media won't say that. It's just like the 308 people who support Hamas that were arrested this week in Washington, D.C. for assaulting police officers and invading congressional offices, stopping members of Congress from doing their job. I'm not talking about January 6th. I'm talking about October 2023. But the news media buried the story. You're not supposed to talk about it. They don't want you to have that news story. It's been buried. It's already gone. You're not thinking about it. Why are you talking about that? You're a bad guy. You must be MAGA. You must be evil because you're actually comparing the very same thing that happened on January 6th, or at least what we're told happened on January 6th. I'm holding the Democrats to the same standard that they established. How dare you do that? You can't do that. No, no, no. And making this worse are people like Mark Molinaro, who are flip-flopping Mike Lawler. They're flip-flopping on their votes for the House Speaker. If we had the House Speaker, we could actually have a debate on the floor of Congress coming from the people, the constituents, saying, as we have seen in polling, in every single poll, approximately 51% of Americans support Israel. They do not support Hamas. Less than 23% of Americans believe that Hamas are the good guys. Less than 23%. And I wish that number was actually 2.3%, but it's not. It's 23. There's a lot of students out there. There's a lot of people who went to college that were taught by people like at Cornell University and their historian professor. So we have a lot of people who have not thought this through. But at least if we have a House Speaker, we can have this conversation and decide, do we want to pay $105 billion for 2 American hostages from a terrorist organization? Are we not setting a precedent that every time that some terrorist organization has American citizens, we have to pay for them up front? What about, does that mean we have to spend $50 million for each of the 200 Americans currently being tortured by ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan that the Biden administration wants you to desperately forget about? Mary says, Mike, have you already mentioned the 6 warships? Yes, I did. The 6 warships deployed by China to the Middle East. No, I don't mind people jumping in late. That's fine. You're here. You're part of the audience. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here at all, Mary. And yes, I did mention that China has in the Gulf 6 of their warships in support of Iran, who has been working with China and North Korea and Russia against the United States and our allies. Yes. And they're there to help support when Yemen, the Yemeni Houthis, let me be clear, it's the Houthis, the Iran-backed terrorists in Yemen, are firing rockets, at Israel. That's why the Chinese are there, to help them get targeting. They're there for logistics. They're there for support. And they're there to make sure that the American government doesn't take any real action. Not that I think the Biden administration wants to. I mean, that's why they delayed the USS Eisenhower from showing up in the Middle East. I strongly and truly believe that. So yes, Mary, I did bring that up earlier, and it will be in the links in the show. But I can tell you, folks, it seems like I'm watching the numbers, and as I go through each of the different parts of what's happening in the world right now and how they are interconnected, and they are displaying the absolute failure of the American government, especially under the Biden-Harris administration, I'm watching people get kicked off of this. I don't know that anyone's able to see this properly because they just don't want you to know. It's terrifying, folks. 2.5 hours goes by fast. So let me ask, I've covered a lot of this, and for those who have missed any of this, I have, 35, 40 sources from international news media covering everything that we've been talking about today. 35, 40, I didn't count it out. It's 35 or 40 different international news sources, which are covering all the aspects of what's happening in the world right now, so that you can see it, not just from the highly edited, highly selective, approved messaging of the United States government via the CNN and MSNBCs of the world. And these are all questions that we really need to ask and we really need to resolve quickly, because this is escalating. This is not over. I guarantee you, it is my prediction, a couple of predictions. One, we are going to see more of the Americans and some of the hostages from other countries, probably the Germany, probably the United Kingdom, are going to get released. We're going to see humanitarian aid in about the same amount of what the United States is going to provide to Hamas are going to come from the various other nations where they have hostages. And it's just going to so happen that each nation that has a bunch of hostages is going to donate somewhere around $100 billion to the humanitarian effort for Hamas. It's just going to happen that that's the number. And then you're going to see slowly, as this money comes in, you're going to slowly see a bunch of hostages from all these other countries going out. Inevitably, you are going to see that Hamas is going to lose this war. Israel is absolutely going to win. Hamas is going to stop fighting. They're going to use the money that is being funneled into them from the various NGOs and various governments, and they're going to use that money to buy more rockets, more suicide drones, more weapons from Iran, so that they can then attack Israel again. And it may take a year, it may take 2 years, it'll probably be somewhere in 2025, 2027, they're going to do it again. Except the next time they do this, it's going to be at the same time that China is going to be going into Taiwan. And it's going to be while Russia is continuing to fight the Ukraine. And we're going to have 3 regional conflicts all at the same time. And the Biden administration can't handle it. Hell, they couldn't even get the USS Eisenhower to show up in the middle into the Mediterranean to support the Gerald Ford. And all they have to do is just get one aircraft carrier into the Mediterranean where it was supposed to go for 2 years. That was part of the plan already. And they screwed that up, as we discussed last week. Mike Bowie says, can the government regulate the dark web? No. That's like, you cannot fully silence the internet as it exists. Cannot silence any voice completely. No matter how much YouTube or Facebook or any of the social media giants, as much as they would like to, as long as the interconnectivity of the internet allows for people to be able to reach other people. I mean, that's why it was created. The internet was created by DARPA, not Al Gore. It was created by DARPA as an alternative means of communication during war. That's why the military created the internet. DARPA, the think tank, they created so there's another way besides cell phones, besides landlines, another way to have communications almost instantaneously around the world during times of war. That's why the internet was created. But once you've created that network, and it absolutely exists now, you can't shut it off. And you can't isolate it. No government can do that. So there will always be ways for people to communicate, whether we want them to or not. Because this is how Hamas and Al-Qaeda and ISIS, how Hezbollah and the Houthis, they all use the internet too. That's the double-edged sword of having open communication. You're going, whether it's and the same thing happens in North Korea and in China, people, whether the government wants to or not, people will communicate. So there will always be a dark web. There will always be people speaking up. The problem is how many people can hear it and how valuable or how useful or how beneficial is that conversation? That's really the question we should be asking. Mary says, monetary negotiations with terrorists started with Bo Bergdahl, and it's insane. It will not stop now. Democratic administrations have created a monster. Well, yes, we see it, and you're right. But for those who don't remember, and we covered this on the channel, so you can look it up, but under the Obama administration, a traitor, a treasonous individual, Bo Bergdahl, who walked away from the United States military to join Al-Qaeda, to fight against American citizens, He was eventually captured and was released back to America. Obama traded this individual who helped to kill or caused to be killed American citizens, as we found out when we received him. He was responsible for the death of American soldiers. We got him back, and we traded 5 of the top leaders of ISIS. We traded them off so we can get a traitor back. And Obama was asking everyone to praise him because he got one traitor back. Because he got one hostage back who happened to be a traitor, who was responsible for having Americans killed. We got him back. And Obama said, hey, I'm a great leader. No, you're not. Bo Bergdahl was a traitor. He should have been shot for treason. We shouldn't have gotten him. If we got him back, we should have tried him instantly for treason and shot him. But, that's me. But yes, you're right. People saw. And who was the vice president under Obama when that negotiation was being made? Who is one of the individuals who is doing the international policy and making those international negotiations? John Kerry, Joe Biden. And who's involved in that process right now? Joe Biden and John Kerry. And, of course, Anthony Blinken. So, I agree with you, Mary. But you're not supposed to remember these things. We're not supposed to talk about these things. I'm a bad guy because I have a memory. And I remember what we have seen that led to this day. And because I'm telling you about it, and I'm reminding you of a bad foreign policy of a weak president before this bad policy of a weak president, well, I'm a bad guy now. How dare I tell you about these things? Because, Obama was a saint and he was perfect, and so is Biden. Oh, by the way, side note, the saint George Floyd died from an overdose. I know this will be shocking news for everyone. George Floyd died from an overdose. He didn't get choked. He didn't die from suffocation. He died because he was a drug addict and a drug dealer and a violent criminal. And that killed him. So it's a really good question if we should, whether or not the officers that were arrested for strangling him, for murdering him, whether or not they should be released. It's factually known that's not true. Let me see if I can bring this up for you guys. So let's see. The news media is trying to, as of the 21st, they're pushing back. Where is it? April 2021. Wow. And by the way, let me show you what I'm looking at here, folks. So if you type in George Floyd overdose, and I type badly because I can't see, but if you type in George Floyd overdose, and you'll see that there's a bunch of fact checkers that have come out. There's a new report that identifies that George Floyd had suffered massive, he had an overdose of fentanyl in his system. Fentanyl will shut down your system, makes you unable to breathe. It kills you. Suffocation is one of the things. And now we see that the news media is saying, no, it's not conclusive. That's not a fact. We're not sure about that. Even though CNN April of 2021 says, heart disease, fentanyl contributed to George Floyd's death. Yeah, we knew that. But they want a message out there. But I noticed that they don't show the actual new report. They're not telling people what the actual new report says. And a new autopsy. So they're saying that, here's interesting. George Floyd's autopsy report is not new. The first sentence in their, this is the claim, that it is new. So now they're trying to say that, nope, it's not new. I have seen a report. I thought there was a new report, a new autopsy report that said that George Floyd had died from overdose. But I can't find it. But then again, there's a lot of things you can't find on the internet. To go back to what you had asked Mike Bowie, can the government regulate the dark web? No. The government can't hide things either, but they can, but you can with YouTube, with Google. You can bury something in the algorithm so deep, no one can find it again. As an example, go to October 7th. Look up the statement by Hamas about why did they attack civilians in Israel. There is a published statement. They have a declaration. Hamas said that they will continue to kill Israeli people until they are eliminated from the face of the earth, that it is a genocide, that they will never be done until they genocide the people of Israel. That is a fact. That is what was reported. And to see that, you can't find it. You can't find a single statement from the organization of Hamas on or around October 7th. There are no quotes from them. It's buried. Every news agency, doesn't matter, you can search them all. You cannot find a quote from Hamas. Even though Hamas did release a quote, you can't find it on the internet. So they bury a lot of things. You don't have to believe me. Just type it in yourself. October 7th, Hamas statement. You won't find it. You will not find it. Statement, Israel. You will not find anything. I've tried. I did it last week, as a matter of fact. You can't find it. All right, so far today, we have talked about the YouTube censorship. We've talked about flip-flopping on votes for House Speaker, which is Mark Molinaro. We've talked about the House Speaker. We've talked about inflation actually being 24%, not the 17% that we predicted February 17th of 2021. That's how long ago we predicted the economy that we're having right now, that we told you we would be in a recession. February of 2021, we nailed it. And it's even worse than what we thought at the time, which would be a high of about 15% inflation. We've already exceeded that. We were talking about the movement towards conservatism throughout Europe and in South America, around the world, because socialism has failed. Again, demonstrably. We've talked about the need for leadership and what it is costing us in the world. We've talked about what's happening with China and its aggressive moves, and the fact that it's getting 1,000 nuclear weapons, that it's militarizing and preparing and in the logistics phase for 3 regional wars, and that the Philippines and Japan, North Korea, they're all getting ready for it. They are very aware of it. That they are supporting their allies, for lack of a better word, their co-conspirators in North Korea, Iran, and Russia towards that goal. We've talked, of course, about what's happened with the hostages, both in Afghanistan, Ukraine, Sudan, and in Israel, and how the Biden-Harris administration has failed every single one of them. And how the censorship that is coming from YouTube, that is coming from the White House, labeling everything that they don't like as misinformation, is trying to obscure all of these people that have been abandoned and abused because of the Biden-Harris administration, just so that you will vote Democrat. So we've covered a lot of ground with a lot of details from around the world. And there's going to be a professor tomorrow. There are going to be teachers and there are going to be professors at universities, at Cornell University, at Tufts University, at Harvard, that are going to be at your local community college, that are going to be at your local high school. They're going to try and tell your kids, oh, by the way, Hamas is great. They're going to tell you that, you know what, Rashida Tlaib, she's right. The poor people of Hamas, we have to feel bad for Hamas. They're going to leave out the fact that even Democrats like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is nowhere near a moderate, she is absolutely a progressive. Even she denounces what we are seeing. Besides the fact that AOC and Ilhan Omar gave a half-hearted denouncement, even, as I showed you, even Debbie Wasserman Schultz says this is leading towards violence. The support of Hamas is increasing the violence in the United States and the world, and it is making the world less safe. I've shown you the evidence, and the links will be in the description at the end of the show so you can look in it in more detail. We're being led down a very, very dark path. And we've got to do something about it. And I think we're down this dark path, and we see this reemergence of the Ministry of Truth, this reemergence of the suppression and censorship. We're seeing this come back because, well, we have elections coming up. And they need to fortify the election just like they did in 2020. Remember that? Newsweek, that social media, news media, politicians, some political organizations all came together to fortify an election to make sure that Joe Biden would win. And now they're doing those same exact steps again to fortify the election, to make you afraid, to make you support terrorism, to fortify this election so the Democrats win again. Hey, user has been banned. You joined us. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad to see you here. I see a few people are joining us a little bit later. I'm pretty sure that no one got the notification that we went live because YouTube doesn't want people to know that. I'm pretty sure that you weren't able to find this in a search because YouTube hates that. So I'm glad to see people are joining in. User says, I'll have to catch the earlier part of the show later. Greta Thunberg is the latest lefty darling to be supporting humans with a blue octo plushie. What? Hamas? Oh, let me see if I can find that. Greta Thunberg, huh? I haven't heard about this. Let me see if I can find. Bear with me, folks. I'm trying to find. Nope, that's not the one I wanted. Where is it? Here it is. Well, let's see. There is an article from Fox News, but I don't quote Fox News. Rolling Stone? Greta Thunberg was targeted for an octopus. Then it chimed in. "100 environmental activists in Israel to Greta Thunberg after Gaza posts. Appallingly one-sided and ill-informed." Let's see that one. Let's see what they have to say here. So Greta Thunberg is appallingly one-sided and ill-informed. Again, notice you have to go outside the United States. We'll check out the Rolling Stone review of this as well in just a second. 100 environmental activists. So these are her people. These are the people that are in the same mindset as Greta Thunberg. These are the people she stands beside, have come out and told her that that they do not support Gaza, they do not support Hamas, they do not support terrorism and the killing of civilians. "Do you think Hamas represents human rights and freedom? Think again." That's what the letter to Greta Thunberg is saying. Okay, so we're getting a sense of what's being said there. This is from, of course, the Times of Israel. But these are environmental activists that they're quoting. These are environmental activists like Greta Thunberg. So let's see what Rolling Stone has to say about it. "Greta Thunberg was targeted for an octopus, then Israel chimed in." Let's see. So social media accounts initially went after the young climate activists for a plush octopus that appeared in the background of her Stand with Gaza post. Okay, let me get this right. Notice how they throw in the young climate. She's a grown woman. She may be a young woman, but they want you to still think of her as a child, as a kid in high school. They always love to frame Greta Thunberg as if she never grew up. It's kind of like David Hogg. They want you to believe that they are still on that one time frame, kind of like Trayvon Martin. They want you to think of these kids, these individuals, these symbols in that one moment and only in that one frozen moment in time. Greta Thunberg is in her 20s. She's a grown woman. She's not some youthful child with youthful enthusiasm and the wide-eyed wonder of the world. She's an activist. She's a grown woman. This is her job. She's not some innocent. So that's something to notice when you read through some of these things. When you're listening to how the news media is representing some of these sides, you can see their subtle way, and it's really not that subtle, of how they're trying to change the way you envision this. They want you to think of her as, oh, you can't say anything against Greta Thunberg. She's a young kid. No, she hasn't been a young kid for many years. She's an adult. And we can take her on because she's an adult. She can't use the excuse of, I'm a child, so you can't say anything. Two weeks into the horrific war between Israel and Hamas, actually, there's another thing. See, they say Israel and Hamas. No, it should be Hamas and Israel. If you're going by the names of the nations alphabetically, Hamas comes first, Israel comes second. But that's another thing. They're playing with it. The first thing they want in your mind is Israel. The war, Israel. War, Israel. They want you to think and associate Israel with war, not Hamas in war. So they try and get Hamas as far away from the word war as they can because they're trying to frame your mindset. Again, English language, English structure. They're playing a game with you. The state of online discourse has descended from generally bad and stupid to unfathomably bad and borderline disgusting. Or no, excuse me, borderline dangerous. So people pointed out that she had some kind of octopus symbol on her, and people misunderstood that and thought that she had some kind of German 1930s symbol with her. Well, I wouldn't be surprised because, Greta Thunberg doesn't really support human beings. Historically, she has not supported human beings. Okay. So with that being said, let me go back to some of the comments here. Mike Bowie says, why would an environmentalist support Hamas? I have no idea. Why would Greta Thunberg, other than the fact that everyone in the world is picking a side, am I surprised that the far left is supporting Hamas against Israel because Israel is an ally of the United States? Because it's part of their message that, they're the oppressed. And of course, the more oppressed you are, the more victim you are, the more you have to be supported. That's something we see, whether it's social justice, environmental justice, it's racial justice, all the qualifiers for justice all seem to have the same thing. Victimhood. You are a victim. Victims get rewarded. And so we have to support every victim of every single type. They were supporting Lizzo because she was fat. And oh my God, you can't say that because Bossity Positive, she's a victim of being overweight. I guess you can say it that way. And so they had to support her until they found out that she was sexually abusing people. And then they stopped talking about her. Okay. And we see this all the time. So that's the only reason why I can think of is why Greta Thunberg, an environmentalist, has anything to say about international politics and, in particular, a terrorist organization. Okay, so the article, user has been banned, mentioned in the Times article. They have a different picture. User has been banned, says she's 20, or I believe she's 21 now. She is a grown adult. She's actually 22 or 23 now, because she became a legal adult, and she's been, which is when the moment, you notice that Greta Thunberg, like many of these young activists, the moment that they become adults and are no longer protected by the shield of being young kids, one, the media always remembers them only as young kids, and they stop speaking. They stop getting covered. Why? Because now you can critically look at what they have said, and you can demand, you can take them on, challenge their points of view, and ask them for clarification. And then as an adult, they have to provide it. And since they can't, and since all their rhetoric is just parroting, they go out of favor and they stop talking about them. Yeah, they are a cult. It is very much cult-like. But I hadn't heard about Greta Thunberg. But again, I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised that Rolling Stone, a left-leaning newspaper that's supposed to talk about music, is somehow jumping on the bandwagon of both environmentalism and they're jumping on the bandwagon of international politics and taking the side of, apparently, Hamas, a terrorist organization. That tells you there's a problem. And the problem is with Rolling Stone. And leave Greta alone. Uh-oh, I just noticed that. If you look at it, look at it. What's the subject? What's the article from Rolling Stone is leave Greta alone. No. That's my answer. No. So that's the actual title of this is leave Greta alone. Leave Greta Thunberg alone. She's a young kid. No, she's not. She's a grown adult. Leave Greta Thunberg alone. She's an environmentalist. Then she should shut her mouth up about international politics if she knows nothing about what she's talking about. Leave Greta Thunberg alone. She's a hero for the left. I'm not part of the left. I don't care. Greta Thunberg was targeted. She's targeted. She opened up her mouth. She made a comment publicly. She is a public figure, and she jumped into an issue that is under international debate. She's open game. But I love how they say, leave Greta alone. You're just a mean bully for actually addressing an international public figure and addressing their political commentary. What, I can't talk about Joe Biden or Kamala Harris? I can't talk about Dianne Feinstein, LaFonza Butler? I can't talk about Netanyahu or Iran and Rayasi? I can't talk about Rishi Sunak? What are you saying? Oh no, only certain people you can talk about. Like, you can only talk about politicians on the right if you're talking about them negatively. That's okay. But don't pick on the left and their heroes. Don't pick on people they support, whether they're right or wrong. You can't do that. Because that's what Rolling Stone, that's the way they've written this article. It's really kind of pathetic. But I thank you, User Has Been Banned, for bringing that up for me, because I didn't see that. Then again, I don't read Rolling Stone very often. All right, folks, so we've been on for about 3.5 hours. I am being massively suppressed by by YouTube and Google. They hate my guts, which means, please, all I ask is like, share, subscribe. You don't have to agree with me 100%. That's not required. I'm not a progressive. You can disagree with me. But the fact that we want to protect free speech, not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world, to be able to hear your voices, to hear your comments, both live and after the fact, that's what's important. And that's what you're actually supporting when you support this channel. When you like, share, and subscribe, you're actually helping us to protect the free speech that is actively being attacked by the White House, that is actively being attacked by Google and YouTube, as I have shown you that they are actively trying to censor people to be able to fortify the 2024 election. They're trying to suppress your voice. You're not supposed to talk. Well, you know what? Like, share, and subscribe so that they understand they can't silence your voice or my voice or any other voice. And if you want, I would appreciate it to help us get out of the temporary studio here in the Bronx and get into a permanent studio to help us to pay some of the bills. If you can, become part of our Patreon. It's $1.50 a month, $1.50. We're not Netflix, we're not Hulu, we're not Disney. We're not trying to shove a bunch of entertainment that you don't like and don't want and don't appreciate and charging you $15, $20 a month to try and tear apart your day. No, $1.50 a month, and we do about 30 hours of content every month on something that actually affects your life and is important. That's if you can. But if you can't, that's all right. Just like, share, and subscribe. That's free. Costs you nothing. User Has Been Banned says, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it really, really is. It's really interesting to see how this has all come together. But what I recommend is, there's about, if you have some free time, I know we've spent about 3.5 hours today talking about all these factors, but I'm going to have the link of, I think it's something like 40 articles to show you exactly every source, almost every single one of them, the left-leaning source that has gone through all the information I've talked about today so that you can make up your mind for yourself. Because I think you're smart enough. I think you have agency. You are an individual. You're a human being. I respect you. Whether you come to the same conclusion I do or not, that's not important. I think that if you're informed, you will make the best decision for yourself. Unlike the White House, unlike YouTube and Google and Facebook and Twitter, all the social media giants, they don't believe that. They think they have to tell you what to think and how to feel. At least that's what the Democratic Socialists of America want, and they want you to vote Democrat. Hey, it's up to you. It's up to you, folks. It really is. All right. So with that said, we've been on 3 hours and 15 minutes. I'm going to let everyone go. I want you to have a great Sunday if possible. Pray for those who are still in Israel. Pray for the hostages that are being held as human shields. Pray that Hamas, gets some kind of spark of human decency and lets those people go without having to be paid $50 million per person. That just out of human decency, they let those people go. We can only pray. We can only hope. And, of course, we will be back every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk with you about this and all the issues that are affecting us all. Thank you, folks.